Welcome. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We will go over applications. We will try and allot ample time for everyone to speak. There are a lot of people here to speak, so if you can keep your comments brief and to the point. I will, once we start the hearing, sort of go over the scope of our review of the first application on our list. We ask that if you're not speaking on the matter, if you can mute your microphone. If you are speaking, if you could please identify yourself. We generally, if the hearing closes, deliberate the evening of the hearing. If we do deliberate on an application you're interested in, we request that you not comment during the deliberations. That is a closed process for the board members. If you choose not to wait for the deliberations, you can always call Woody in the morning and he can tell you how things worked out. Without anything further, we'll start with calendar number 15-2020. This is the application of Amy Suchins, John Nuff, and Hertzwig, Sagren, Schlossberg, and Knopf on behalf of 7-Eleven at 306 Boston Post Road. So just to be clear, we have a limited review envelope on this matter. Although I think that there's some challenge to this, we believe we have authority to approve the location as a safe location for a fueling station. And we have the authority to review whether a sign variance is appropriate. So, other concerns about this project are best directed to the Planning and Zoning Commission, not to this commission. With that said, Attorney Suchins, if you want to get started on this matter, we'll start with you.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy Suchins, attorney at Hurwitz, Sagren, Schlossberg, and Knopf with offices in Milford, here representing 7-Eleven. With me tonight is our design team. I'll introduce everybody as needed, but just as a quick refresher, we opened this hearing at your September meeting, gave a pretty comprehensive presentation of the development proposal at that time, and what we were waiting for was specifically the completion of the peer review process of our traffic study. Jason Adams, our traffic engineer from McMahon Associates, is here and will take you through a short presentation on sort of a refresher on what we originally did, the work that's been done in coordination with Mike Galante, the town's peer reviewer, and then we can also go back to the sign variances. The other thing relevant to both of those is that in the interim period, we have had an extensive discussion with obviously hearing from many of the public that are on tonight's meeting, as well as feedback from the Architectural Review Board and Planning and Zoning. And so we've made revisions to the building, which are not technically in your jurisdiction, but also reflect changes to the signage plan that reduce the number of variances that we're seeking from you. So with that, just again, as a background, your jurisdiction is the location approval, which is your role as an agent of the state of Connecticut to determine whether or not this site is suitable for a gasoline station. And then the other item is the sign variances. At this point, we have requested variances related to 3 of the existing regulations. One that is a carryover from the initial submission, 935 D5B, which is to allow the fuel price sign to be approximately 5 feet from the property line along the Boston Post Road. That fuel price sign would be co-located with monument sign for the overall site. The second variance is for 935 C1B, which would be to allow the primary wall sign to be at an elevation of 20 feet above grade. Your requirement, or excuse me, limitation is 15 feet. And we've done that. I can When we get to the plans, I will walk you through where we are, but that was in response to the building revisions that have been made to address some of the other comments. So there was a slight change to the sign. And then with respect to 936A4B, at this point we have, despite an extensive effort with the Architectural Review Board, they couldn't come to any consensus on our application, provided a unfavorable report, and so we are bound by the otherwise the 26-inch maximum letter requirement, maximum height requirement for any letter, logo, or symbol on a sign in an automobile oriented district. This is the SB district, so that's in one of your automobile oriented districts. So what we're asking for is to allow the total logo height of both the 7-Eleven logo on the monument sign to be 48 inches and the wall sign to be approximately 60 inches. So knowing that where we left off at the hearing back in October was the board members' questions with respect to traffic and the peer review comments. Mr. Galante is on the call. I'll go back to the signage, but I wanted to turn it over to Jason Adams to give an update on where we are in the feedback, and then allow Mr. Galante the opportunity to address the comments from the peer review, and I think we can address it that way, and then we can go back to the signage, because I think frankly that would just be the most efficient way, rather than us going back and forth between the two, if that's acceptable to you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'd like to focus on the traffic. It was a part of the application that wasn't very well fleshed out. So if we can start with the traffic and the location discussion, and then we can circle back to the variances for the signage.
Yep. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jason. He moved on my screen, sorry. So Jason Adams is our traffic engineer from McMahon Associates. And with that, I'll turn it over to him.
Great, thanks, Attorney Suchins. For the record, Jason Adams with McMahon Associates. Good evening, members of the board. Would it be okay for me to share my screen? I just have a couple quick slides to go over. I thought it might be easier to have a visual on a couple things.
Yeah, Fred, you can help with that? Or?
Yeah, one moment, Jason.
I think I can do this. Can everyone see the screen there?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. All right, so my name is Jason Adams. I am a professional traffic engineer registered in the state of Connecticut. I have over 20 years of experience as a traffic engineer, and myself and my firm do work on behalf of states, municipalities, and as well as private developers. I'm going to walk you through just some of the overview of the study that we have completed, just to refresh everyone on where we have been. We had originally completed a traffic impact study in July of last year that was reviewed by the town's peer reviewer, Hardesty and Hanover. We received comments and have been going back and forth with a couple new submissions, as well as additional conversation, culminating in our submittal of a December 31st updated traffic analysis and comments that we received from Hardesty and Hanover last week. So I'll just hit some of the high points here. On the map on the right side of the screen is the study area that we looked at in our study. You can see the site outlined in yellow, located just to the south of the interchange of the I-95 southbound ramp system with Boston Post Road. The study focused on the interchange intersections, the project site driveway, and at the request of the Planning and Zoning Commission and feedback from the public, we added in the intersection of Birch Road and Boston Post Road just to the southwest of the site. This study area has been agreed upon with your peer reviewer. We feel it represents the area of impact of the site. To summarize the key findings of the study, we are recommending that there be 2 exiting lanes for the project site driveway, a left turn lane and a right turn lane, which would assist in managing vehicle queues on site. I should remind the board that should this project receive local approval, it will still need to be reviewed and approved by the Connecticut Department of Transportation. So everything that we are looking at and your peer reviewer is looking at is going to be looked at again at the state level. We have received preliminary feedback, which has been positive, but the project will need to receive an encroachment permit through the state. A key issue that has been discussed has been the left turn movement out of the site. In the most recent comment letter, your peer reviewer stated that based on their previous comments and discussion with Connecticut DOT, continues to be their opinion that the left turn movement should be permitted out of the subject property under a future condition. And our study indicates that the project can be reasonably accommodated by the surrounding roadways and intersections. To touch on our methodology, the study and the analysis that we have completed has followed industry standard approaches. The approach has been approved by Connecticut DOT, and we have been in communication with them throughout this project. The methodology has also been reviewed and agreed upon by your peer reviewer. They have been very thorough on your behalf in their review of material, and we feel very confident that all of the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed at this point. And thank you for their contributions to the project. The study collected available traffic volume data, forecasted future project vehicle trips, and then reviewed potential impacts of the proposed project. All of these traffic volumes were factored to reflect pre-COVID conditions. So I think we all know at this point that the traffic volumes out there are abnormal. We used data that was collected in 2016 by Connecticut DOT, and then we supplemented that with new counts at Birch Road in October of this past year, which were then factored up to match what would be considered a normal condition. Again, all of that reviewed by both Connecticut DOT and your peer reviewer. The vehicle trips have been distributed based on conversation with your peer reviewer and a review of existing traffic patterns in the area. We grew all of the traffic volumes to a future year of 2022, which is consistent with Connecticut DOT standards. Those volumes are considered to include all known developments in the vicinity of the site, including Darien Crossing occupancy just to the south of the site. And the project trip generation has also been agreed upon with your peer reviewer. Based on the findings and conclusions of our study, we do consider this to be a safe location for this project site. With that, I'm happy to answer questions. I also know that Mike Galante is here if you'd like to hear from him, and happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, Mike, if you could give us some narrative here, because when I look at your January 12th, 2021 letter, you're actually recommending a single lane exit, not the 2 lanes that the applicant is proposing.
Correct. Mike Galante, Odyssey in Hanover. Good evening, everyone. And I'll just, Jason covered, the big highlights of the process over the last several months. And I know Amy mentioned that everything was being held up waiting for our review. I just want to clarify, I know Amy didn't mean it that way, but this process started with us reviewing the traffic study back in probably August of last year. And it went through several variations of that process over the last several months. We offered comments, the applicant responded, always responded. We had more comments, and we went back and forth. And it took some time to go through this process. And the December 31st, 2020 report from the applicant is a report that is the final review that we have tonight. That's the basis of our January 12th letter back to the town. Just in quick summary, we reviewed everything in a lot of detail, obviously. We had a lot of discussions with the applicant's traffic consultant. We met at a couple planning and zoning commission meetings. We had documentation over those last several months. And just want to touch on a couple things so that the commission and the zoning board can understand This is a redevelopment of a property that's a fast food restaurant, as we know. The counts were done during a pandemic condition. We all went through a process to adjust those numbers for a pre-pandemic condition using Conduct data, which is a process we go through, and it's all the volumes are acceptable. We had some comments, they responded to the comments. Just to keep in mind, the Duchess restaurant today, if it was under full occupancy, full operations, if you will, would likely generate about 170 trips during the morning peak hour and about 135 trips during the afternoon peak, just to give you a reference of volume. The new development is a new convenience store with 12 gas pumps in front of it. The pumps is what really generates the traffic in this type of development. The convenience store and the gas pumps tend to work together. 7-Eleven would generate, and these numbers are numbers from the applicant's report. We had some input, of course, during that process, and we agree with all the numbers that are provided. Would generate, in round numbers, about 345 trips during the morning peak hour and about 285 trips during the afternoon peak. How does this compare to the Duchess store that's there today? In the morning, it would add, the new store would add about 177 trips during the morning peak to area roads. This is before you apply credits of pass by and so on. This is volume at the driveway. In the afternoon, it would add about 149 trips. I only bring that up just so that everyone understands this development or redevelopment does add traffic to the roadway system. And of course, the basis of the traffic study is to analyze that and what is the impact of that additional traffic on the roads. And it includes the 5 or 6 intersections that were shown on that graphic earlier, which we agree with the locations. In essence, what that analysis tells us, and as traffic engineers, we deal with delay, levels of service, A through F. I always say, A is just like in school, everything's great. E and F is basically long delays, and if you're in school, you're in trouble when you go home at night. But this is how we rate the intersections, and the analyses were done appropriately. We had some comments during the process. All of that information was modified and updated, and everything, we agree with everything as far as the findings of the report. And I'm not going to go through all the letters and numbers and everything, but generally what the analysis results tell us is at the Birch Road intersection where there were residents, in the Birch Road area were concerned. This development does add traffic to that T intersection, stop sign control, but the increase in traffic doesn't really change how the intersection would operate. And it's mainly the movements exiting Birch Road because that is the stop sign approach to Route 1, which is Boston Post Road. At the driveway itself in the future, and I'll touch on 1 lane versus 2 lanes, the analysis shows that there will be delays on the driveway exiting during the time periods that were analyzed. And I just want to mention the report doesn't include a Saturday analysis only because there was no other data available from Conduct or other sources in order to adjust any new counts that would have been done this past fall or this past summer on a Saturday. But we should all assume that the volume of traffic on Boston Post Road and these intersections is probably higher on a Saturday due to all the commercial development in Norwalk on Connecticut Avenue. So just keep that in mind. And the estimate of site traffic is probably higher than what you might see during the week for this new development. At the driveway, 1 lane versus 2 lanes, the reason why that's kind of up in the air is you do get mixed direction from Conduct. Depending who you speak to, they may say it's only 1 lane exiting and others will say 2 lanes. The states switched to a 1 lane exit a few years ago in their reviews and recommendations. And the main reason for it is there was a concern with 2 lanes coming out at a stop sign. And I have the SUV in the right lane and you have the sports car in the left lane, and we're both waiting to exit the road, the driveway. The guy in the sports car can't see through the SUV. It is a safety concern. That's the simple reasoning for the state going to a 1 lane exit. You'll see off ramps from highways, such as the southbound off ramp at 13, which is just up the road from the site. It's a 1 lane approach, although there are very wide shoulders. And to be honest, it functions with 2 lanes. It functions like 2 lanes. We leave it up to DOT as far as what they will recommend in the final review, which is be for an encroachment permit for modifications to the driveway itself. Whether it's 1 lane or 2 lanes, that's a decision of the state. I do recommend 1 lane only from the safety aspect of it. Keep in mind the driveway where it is today, as far as sight lines, it's a driveway that's been there many years. The state reviewed that location. They provided a letter back to the applicant, I think back in September, I've talked to DOT directly about it, and they felt that the driveway location where it is today, there's no desire to move it. Not that there is an option to move it anywhere else along the site frontage, but they were comfortable leaving the driveway there, and they were also comfortable leaving with full movements, meaning no restriction on left turns. I agree that left turns should be permitted out of the driveway. There's adequate sight distance based on the study provided by the applicant, our review, and our review of the standards that CONDOT would follow. We feel that the left turn should be permitted. And there's a second reason for that. One is I'd rather not have someone make a right turn than a U-turn someplace else to come back towards downtown Darien or points further to the west. The other concern, which is a bigger concern and really a safety concern for me, is I'd rather not have all the site traffic come out of this site, go to the interchange 13 southbound off-ramp, have that traffic that wants to travel back towards the site and beyond the site, essentially make a U-turn at that double intersection, if you will, of Boston Post Road at the 13 southbound off-ramp. The middle median, which is stop sign control, you can fit 2 cars next to each other. You really can't fit much more than that. And they added traffic to that movement, and I'll call it a U-turn movement, even though it's 2 left turns with the median in the middle. In my concern is the delay and the queuing is increased if cars are making that left turn, and that backs up onto the through lanes of Boston Post Road. So that's the second reason why I prefer left turns be permitted at the site driveway. If you look at the big picture of all the analyses, that's a concern of ours, that movement there that today has delays, and delay has some safety concerns that I know the state has looked at that more recently, restriped Boston Post Road when it was repaved, and everyone feels that the pavement markings out there are essentially what is the best layout. But I do mention in my report that there should be continuing discussions with or without this development with DOT as far as options for that movement at the exit ramp from 13 on 95. That movement's been reviewed before during other applications that we were involved with, and it's always been a concern. And Richmond Drive, which is just north of there, is a similar condition with people making the left turn across that median opening. Back to the driveway with the configuration and the added traffic from this development as a 7-Eleven, it does have a negative impact on the fitness center that's located directly opposite the 7-Eleven driveway, and their delays would increase coming out of that driveway. That's, of course, part of the analysis. That's a quick summary. I have other comments that we can touch on now or later on as far as the internal layout that's been designed appropriately. They've accommodated, truck deliveries, fuel truck deliveries, where they drop off the fuel, they circulate through the site. That's all been reviewed by our office, and it was certainly done in the appropriate way by their civil engineer. We have a couple concerns internal. If I can just touch on them now, and then I'll be quiet. We do have a concern with the loading spaces being blocked by parked cars, and we do ask in our report how many delivery trucks may there be at this site during a typical day. I don't know the number, but I'm sure their team can figure that out as far as the Coke truck, the bread truck, whatever it might be that brings deliveries. I think those loading spaces should be open to those trucks basically all day long and shouldn't be blocked by parked cars. And that's a layout. They can move parking spaces. I haven't tried to design it for them, but that's something that should be looked at. We have a little bit of concern with the delay in the queuing on site coming out of the site. Depending on the time of day, it may queue into the parking lot, if you will, of the gas station. And the model would tell us exactly where that queuing would be expected towards the gas pumps, and it may block some of the parking spaces near the driveway itself. We did recommend removing one space near the driveway entrance, which I believe they have removed. And the only other comment I'll make as far as accident data, they provided accident analysis. We obtained accident data from the police department they give us 5 years. We looked at that, and as far as the accident data, the only place that we have a little bit of a concern, and it's not directly related to this development, but it's at the Boston Post Road, Old Kings Highway North intersection. There were a number of accidents there, and we just suggested that should be further reviewed and look at, what the repaving of Boston Post Road and the restriping, what impact that may have had on operations and accidents at that location. And I'll just leave it at that. I can certainly answer questions later on, but that's a quick summary. We reviewed all the reports provided by the applicant. They responded to everything we asked for. We had multiple discussions over several months, and we tried to give a review for the town's consideration so you guys and the Planning and Zoning Commission can make a decision at some point. And that's all I have for the moment.
Okay, just a couple of questions. So
Sure.
if we allow a left turn out of this site, we impact the traffic coming out of Dynamic Athletics. I think you said down to an F,
Yes.
which doesn't seem like a great grade to me. I mean,
No, it's long delays on the driveway. You're correct.
okay. And if we make it right turn only, we cause delays at the exit 13 off ramp, which I don't know how familiar you are with that intersection, but I've been in town long enough to know that intersection is probably one of the most dangerous left turns you can make in this town. And it currently backs up almost onto the highway. And recently exit 14 off 95 was redone because of that same problem. I don't want to sit here and create a situation where we're creating a much larger scale issue for not only the town, but for the safety of the residents and other people. So, I mean, it seems like, yeah, it's doable, but it's not great in any sense of the analysis. Like, we're not getting A's on any of this.
No, with or without this development, you don't have A's at all of these intersections. I suggest that the left turn is permitted so you don't have a more of a negative impact on the exit 13 off ramp that you just described.
Okay, so we're gonna impact the traffic going the other way to try and stop the issue. So it's the lesser of two evils, is basically what you're telling me. Like,
That's
neither
correct.
one's great.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I just think the concerns at the exit ramp that exists today is more of a safety concern if you add some of the side traffic to that intersection so they can make a U-turn and go back towards town.
Yeah.
I rather-
Have you ever taken a left out of Dutchess?
Have I? Yes.
Yeah. It's not a particularly safe left turn either.
I would say it's a lot safer than the exit 13 U-turn movement.
Okay.
I've looked at it multiple times. I mean, I know the area quite well, but I've obviously, as part of this application and review, I've been there personally many times since we started this review, just to make sure I was giving the town, my best opinion on certain things.
Okay, and you didn't do any Saturday analysis.
The applicant didn't do any Saturday analysis. We would normally ask for that, but because we did not have, and they did not have data to compare it to and adjust it for the pandemic, it was not provided. And the analysis that's for the weekday afternoon is a similar analysis. It shows delays, and you'll have similar delays on Saturday.
Have you been to the intersection for Chick-fil-A on the Post Road in Norwalk on a Saturday?
Recently, I drove by on Connecticut Avenue. Yes. Keep in mind, because I had someone else make a similar comment for a different reason recently. Look at any fast food restaurant right now with the pandemic. Most people are not going into the restaurant to buy that hamburger, but they're going to the drive-through. And Chick-fil-A is a reference. And no, we didn't do that project. That has a double lane for ordering. It spills out onto Connecticut Avenue. If you look at the Wendy's up there, not necessarily the Burger King, but they all have extensive queuing for people waiting to buy chicken or hamburgers or whatever it might be. We're not in a normal condition. I know what Chick-fil-A did before the pandemic because we looked at that for other reasons. But these drive-through restaurants, with drive-through windows, they're experiencing a lot of delay that we didn't see about a year ago, almost a year ago actually.
Do you know who did the analysis on that?
I do, but I'm not sure if it was another consultant.
Okay. So traffic consultants get this stuff wrong sometimes.
No one did a design of a fast food store with a pandemic. I mean, let's be honest. No one anticipated that a year ago. I would have never been sitting here in January of last year saying if we had a pandemic, we'd have double the traffic or whatever traffic going through a drive-through window because you can't go in and sit down and buy that hamburger. I mean, honestly, I don't think anyone on this meeting tonight would have ever anticipated that.
Right, but to be clear, Duchess doesn't have a backup. Wendy's doesn't have a backup. Popeyes doesn't have a backup.
Different level of business and sales. Duchess, if I could put it, their sales are not as high as the Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, or it was miscalculated.
No, the estimates for site traffic are based on multiple studies by traffic engineers all across the country for fast food type of facilities. If it was a Dunkin' Donuts, there's a different set of numbers. If it's a Starbucks, it's a different set of numbers. If it's a fast food hamburger place, a typical Burger King or McDonald's, or whatever it might be, it's estimates of site traffic, and it's based on square footage of that building, with or without a drive-through. There are different calculations for it. It's not a miscalculation. I mean, there's no way that anyone could have estimated what traffic you would have today with a pandemic condition. If I go down the highway in the morning, and the traffic on 95 is nowhere near what it was this same week last year. It's just not. People work at home. Some other people may never go back to the office, possibly. It's just a condition no one ever thought was possible.
Mike, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Are we
Yeah.
going to stipulate that the trucks, when they exit, will have to turn right, or will they have the option of turning left as well?
Well, at the moment, they would have they could turn right or left unless there was a separate restriction for them. I'm guessing that most of those trucks would probably turn right to go back on 95 anyhow. But unless they're going northbound, they would go back to Old Kings Highway and make those lefts to get back on the highway. That's where the trucks are coming from and going to.
And you mentioned that Dynamic Athletics. That place has mostly been a restaurant in the past. That traffic could pick up quite a bit too if that were to change use.
No.
Michael Cipoletti, if you could please mute your microphone. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's both ways. There's not as many people on the road, but the global pandemic has caused traffic delays at Chick-fil-A.
Yeah, I was at Chick-fil-A the other day, and it was a 45-minute queue, and I don't even eat Chick-fil-A, but that is a problem. They had police lining cars up. I mean, they had a whole security detail monitoring that whole situation. But I do agree, like if you come off of 13, that pile up right there at that turnaround, it gets backed up right away, and there's no intensity of use right now at that Duchess. So if you increase that intensity of use, that's a disaster. But I don't like turning left either. I mean, that's why Trader Joe's cut off that left turn. There were all kinds of accidents right there. So I don't know what the answer is. I agree with Mike's comment that both are bad.
Yeah, let's just touch on Trader Joe's for a moment. They have an opportunity to come out, I think, on Old Kings Highway, if I'm correct, and go to the traffic signal. That's why there's no left turn out of that driveway. We were involved in that also a number of years ago, actually. That's why there's no left turn there, because they have an opportunity to go out on the side road and use the traffic signal to turn left on Boston Post Road.
Actually, if I could correct you there, it was a condition of our variance approval.
Yeah, no, I know, but during the process, that was the consideration that was.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of questions.
I don't recall you being part of that process, Mike.
I was, but I wasn't in front of the zoning board. I was with Jeremy Ginsburg and the police department at the time.
Okay.
Several years ago, actually. I don't remember how long ago.
Someone asked for Kevin Fullington.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, please. So just the very basics. Did I understand your testimony accurately, Michael, and the reports from the Higgins Group correctly that, in essence, we're expecting to see a doubling in the number of trips compared to what's there now?
Is it doubling? It's approximately.
Roughly, in rough numbers.
You are correct, yes.
And you talked about rating various locations A through F. The area that is the most concern to me is not the left turn out of the proposed development, but that exiting off 95 at exit 13. I saw in the original Higgins report different numbers versus the updated report they sent us. How is that intersection rated in the peak hours?
I believe it's E or an F. I have to go back into the charts.
And do we have any question really that that's going to get worse?
No, it will get worse because you're adding traffic to it, and if you have no left turn out of the driveway, it'll be worse than that. It'd be, it's more, you're adding more traffic to that U-turn movement. That's what I'm trying to avoid by making a recommendation to maintain the left
And
turn.
in the original McMahon report, sorry if I called it a Higgins report earlier. In the original McMahon report, I noticed that it called out that in the last 3 years, there have been 12 accidents at that intersection. Do you know, A, if that's accurate, and B, whether that is an unusually high number?
Well, first, I think the 12 accidents might be to those couple intersections at the ramps. I'm not sure.
No, I think it was described as particularly particular to that specific intersection coming off of I-95.
Well, it is a high number of accidents regardless.
And so it says the unsignalized intersection of US Route 1 and the 95 southbound off-ramp had a total of 12 reported crashes over a 3-year period. And so my last question is it reasonable to assume that with a doubling of the number of trips to the location, although unclear exactly how many of them will be coming from Interstate 95, but let's extrapolate that there's a doubling of trips coming off 95, if not more. Is it reasonable to extrapolate that we could see an increase in crashes at that location?
I would say there's a potential to increase the accidents at that location. I can't give you an exact number. It's difficult to say because you're adding traffic, you're doubling the accidents or whatever it might be, but there's a potential to add accidents.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Kevin.
I have
any
another
other-
question too. Yeah, I do. And did you, Mike, I don't think you guys look at this as part of the study. I think you just look at the current entry and exit points. But can we, as an alternative, look at other alternative for exiting the property and going through the side, like to your point about Trader Joe's, so they can go back to Old Kings Highway? There are other ways to exit this property, but it would require that you went through someone else's.
Someone else's property, yeah. I can't make that recommendation. And I'm not so sure the owner of that office building or whoever would, say, yes, have your traffic come through our driveway. And as far as the driveway location directly out of this site to Boston Post Road, the location where the driveway is today is the right location. It was obviously selected by the town and approved by CONDOT many years ago. And it's really, there aren't many opportunities to move the driveway. You don't want to move it closer to the ramps. You need some separation between that right turn, if you will, onto the turnpike and the property line. And if you're looking at sight lines looking towards town, if you will, there's a crest in the road towards Birch Road, and the placement of this driveway is to be able to look over that crest. So if you move away from that crest and go towards the ramps to 95, you would think that you're improving it, but the possibility is that you're actually making it worse.
Thanks.
Okay, are there any other board members that wish to be heard? Okay. Jason, did you have anything to rebut any of Mr. Galante's testimony?
I wouldn't say that I have anything to rebut. If the board had anything that they wanted me to speak to, personally, I'm happy to do so, but I would say I was in general agreement with Mr. Galante.
Mr. Chairman, just one question for Jason. So I'm just trying to understand the difference between your original report and your most recent report. So in your most recent report dated December 31st, in reference to the intersection at I-95 at exit 13, you describe the quote 2022, so next year, the combined conditions there are shown to operate at an LOSE during both peak hours. But in your original report, you write that under 2022 background conditions, these critical movements are expected to operate at LOSF during the weekday morning and LOSE during the weekday afternoon peak hours, respectively. So I'm just curious as to why in your updated report, it says E as the combined conditions, but your original report cited it as F and E, depending on when you looked at the peak conditions.
Right, and not to get too into the nuts and bolts of everything that has changed, but we have done a thorough review of both the trip generation and trip distribution. So the number of vehicle trips at the driveway that are associated with the 7-Eleven development, as well as where those trips go to and come from. We've been through a couple iterations with Hardesty Hanover, and also again have reviewed these volume sets with Connecticut DOT. I think the easiest way to answer it is that while it is now shown to be a level of service E, it is a high level of service E, and once you get to a certain volume set, that E and F line, it doesn't take much to get from an E to an F. I guess just a couple points of reference here with that intersection. We certainly understand Mr. Galante's concerns with the intersection, the town's concerns with the intersection. It is an area that Connecticut DOT has recently been doing work around. They did signal improvements just this summer, actually. So some of the crash history that has existed could be positively influenced. It's far too early to tell, and without normal traffic volumes, it's not really like there's available data to judge that. But Connecticut DOT has been looking at that intersection. Also, not to downplay the analysis results, but there certainly is room, and it's not a great condition for it to be happening, but for vehicles to stack somewhat side by side at that location. The analysis doesn't necessarily reflect that vehicles could take that successive gap in traffic. So, two vehicles lined up side by side, there's a gap, they might be turning essentially at the same time. Again, not something we specifically advocate for in terms of how you would want to ultimately design that, but that does happen. And the analysis in that sense may be overrepresenting the delay at certain times. So agree with the results that a level of service E is there, but it is a complicated system, as I'm sure everyone is aware.
Okay. Are there any other attorneys who wish to ask the experts questions before I open this up to the public?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question for Mr. Galante. I wasn't sure if you meant whether Mr. Maslin or I'm not sure if Mr. Gleason's on the call, whether you wanted them to or whether your question was directed just to me.
Yourself and or Attorney Maslin, and I do not see Attorney Gleason.
Okay. So I do have one question for Mr. Galante, which is whether he believes, given what he's seen, the site's suitable for use as a gas station.
I assume you want me to answer that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, as far as a location for a gas station, I'd have to say it's a proper location. It's near a highway, it's near ramps, it's on a state highway. I'd have to say yes, it's a proper location, excluding safety concerns at off ramps nearby and so on.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, you excluded
Mr. Chairman, if I may make comment, that's a very misleading question. Not much we can do about it, but that's a very misleading question. A gas station, a simple gas station, is not what's being requested here. So I think more definition needs to be made to the phrase gas station before Mr. Galante can answer that question. In my personal opinion, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Williams, as noted in the staff report, your jurisdiction as the ZBA and the location approval is with respect to the gas station portion of the operation. The suitability and related uses on the site are not technically within your jurisdiction. You're being asked whether the site, under the statute, whether the site is suitable for a gas station.
It's a fair comment, Amy, but I stand by my comments as well.
Understand.
Mr. Galante, did I hear you to say that safety concerns aside?
I'm just referring to the location for a gas station. That's why, there are safety concerns that I mentioned at the off-ramp. But the question as to, is this a proper location for a gas station? Excluding the analysis, how many pumps, how much traffic is generating, I'd have to say it is a proper location for a gas station. But then you get into the nitty-gritty of the details of the analysis, and we see, a fair amount of traffic's being added because of the 12 pumps, for example. And there are safety concerns with the nearby off-ramp from I-95. But to answer the question about the location for a gas station, I'm not looking at the traffic aspects of it. I'm just looking at the location for a gas station. If I can answer that, I'm not trying
So
to
let
limit.
me ask you a slightly different question.
Sure.
Is this a safe location for a gas station?
That was a tough question to answer when you ask about safety, but the analysis and the data shows that there are some safety concerns with traffic from this location as a gas station or any other use, such as the 95 southbound off-ramp.
Thank you. Attorney Maslin, do you have anything you want to ask the traffic?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had one comment, and if Mike Galante can address it, that's fine. If not, when you get off, and by the way, I represent Smart Foods of Darien, which is the mobile station across the street and up a little bit to the east from Dutchess. When you get off that exit ramp from westbound 95 onto the Post Road at night, and you're not familiar with the area, there's a tendency for some people unfamiliar trying to get off because their phone is telling them there's a 7-Eleven. They make a left after the first stop sign, and now they're heading directly against traffic. And if you're wondering if I am speculating here, that actually happened to me one night. It was dark. I was finished up on the way home, and my heart stopped because somebody was heading directly toward me. And if you've ever experienced having a set of headlights coming at you at night, it's quite an experience. Mr. Galante, do you have any thoughts about the risk of that happening or an increased risk of that happening because of the nature of the 7-Eleven business, the overnight hours, darkness, lack of other intense traffic at those hours, and the possibility of head-on crashes?
Well, I can't speculate that a 7-Eleven customer is going to turn at the wrong, direction on Boston Post Road. There are signs out there saying "Do not enter," one-way traffic, whatever. Can more be done with signing? Probably. I've been told that this has occurred in the past. I don't think any of the accident data from the last few years indicates that. But is there a possibility that someone may make that first left turn instead of the second left turn? I'm sure the answer is yes. It is a little confusing. If it's a driver that's not familiar with the area, someone could make that first left turn and make that mistake.
Thank you. That's the only comment I had at this point.
Okay. Sticking with the traffic analysis and location, is there anyone from the public that wants to be heard on that specific issue? Ms. Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan Pegler. I live at 31 Point of Woods. I'm just speaking as a mom. I drive my son to school every day up in Westport. So I'm getting off 95, going towards the city every day, usually around 2 or 3, which is not, a high commuting time. Usually I get off at the intersection that we're talking about, and I make a right towards Norwalk, and I live off Richmond. So I quickly dart across the Post Road through the median to get to Richmond, and that's fine. Sometimes I want to make the left to go towards the proposed site, to go towards town. And the median in the middle of the road pretty much has room for 2 cars side by side, maybe 2 cars behind them to make the left. It's treacherous, and I'm just wondering if there are trucks waiting to make that left. how that's going to impact traffic. I mean, I've been driving on the Post Road towards Norwalk, and there'll be one truck and it's hanging off into the Post Road, basically stopping traffic or making the traffic going towards Norwalk swerve around the back of the truck. So that's just, I guess I'm just also concerned about that particular median. It's not safe, you know, with cars. I just don't know how it's going to be adding trucks into the mix. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Jason or Michael, you know, two questions that come up there. One is how are trucks going to impact that safety aspect? And then, Michael, you had asked earlier, and I guess we don't have the data on the number of deliveries, which I'm assuming would be impactful to the traffic and safety of the site. So I don't know if Jason or Michael, you want to start, but those are two questions I have.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, if I could just answer that question because I think it's helpful. We had submitted to P&Z back, I think at the December meeting, and I'm happy to get a copy for your record if necessary. They had asked about deliveries as well. Our estimate is that there will be approximately 10 to 15 box trucks, so you know those kind of smaller delivery trucks a week, 10 to 15 a week, and 2 trailer truck deliveries a week, all related to the store operations. We've agreed to limit deliveries from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we will also, because it's a 7-Eleven corporate-owned store, deliveries are made on an as-needed basis. So there's no, there's no chip truck that shows up if there are no chips being sold. It's as needed from, a corporate ordering system. So we can control to some extent when those deliveries are made, and we would agree to limit those to outside peak hours is what we've told planning and zoning.
Okay, you said from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. Did you mean 5 a.m. to 8 a.m.?
No. So the overall, P&Z was asking about an overall window. They didn't want to have middle of the night deliveries. So it's 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. would be the overall delivery window. And then generally our peak hours are 6 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. And so it would be unlikely we would, unless, there was an emergency, if we're getting a snowstorm or something, there might be some deliveries that are made, but generally we would avoid peak hour deliveries.
Okay, and you said 10 to 15 box trucks and how many tractor trailers?
2 tractor trailers, both of those are weekly numbers. And
how about the fuel?
The fuel we expect to be average with the surrounding stations, anywhere between 2 and 4 trucks a week.
And those are tractor trailers?
They're fuel tankers, yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, does that make the total number of trucks per week 6?
So, yeah,
no.
I think the range would be somewhere between 4 and 6, depending on how much fuel we sell and store needs.
Okay, so we have 15 box trucks per week and 6 tractor trailers per week, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so back to Michael and Jason. Was this factored into, obviously, Michael, it wasn't because you said you didn't have the data. Was this factored into your analysis, Jason?
Yeah, so the analysis includes the existing heavy vehicle percentages out there. So trucks currently making any move within the study area are included in the analysis. As Attorney Suchin said, the primary deliveries are going to take place outside of peak times. So the trucks associated with this project site would not specifically be taking place during the time of the analysis. But I will say that as we added vehicle trips associated with this project to our traffic network, we didn't reduce the percentage. The heavy vehicle number is in the analysis as a percentage. So that percentage remains the same. So essentially, as we increase the number of trips, that percentage is still applied to that number of trips, and it makes it maybe a somewhat conservative analysis, but the trips would primarily take place outside of the peak periods.
Michael, do you have any comment on that?
No, I would agree. You know, the estimates for traffic, which are taken from what's called the Trip Generation Handbook, estimates for this type of use. If there are any truck deliveries during the peak hours, it's included in those numbers. But typically, the truck deliveries would not occur, probably would not occur at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, 9 o'clock in the morning. They tend to come after that.
Okay. And with the recommendation of a single lane of exit, Jason, does that modify your calculations?
Our recommendation is 2 lanes exiting the site, separate lanes, with the caveat that we will of course have to have this reviewed and approved by Connecticut DOT, and as Mr. Galante went through, there are conflicting opinions you can get out of the state. This project, like all projects, would need to be reviewed, and we will need to go along with what the state sees is best. It is their roadway system at the end of the day. The heavy vehicle percentage, again, wasn't included during the peak period, so there are not heavy vehicles shown to exit the site during those peak periods within the analysis. They would, of course, exit the site during other times of day when you know, vehicle trips along Post Road may be less or likely less, and therefore that's a benefit to both the site but also those truck trips as well.
Okay. I guess what I'm struggling with is our expert is telling us that a single lane exit is a safer alternative. In our area of review is safety of the location for use as a gas station. And so I'm struggling with, if we're not doing that analysis, why aren't we doing that analysis?
The analysis of a single lane exit you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, we had presented that in our original traffic impact study. We presented both a single lane analysis and a double lane analysis. As has been mentioned, the single lane does result in more vehicle queuing on site. We don't see it as a specific safety concern to have 2 lanes exiting the site. It's common along Post Road in this area, and we feel that would process vehicles coming from the site in a more efficient manner. So there could be you know, the 2 vehicles that Mr. Galante talked about exiting the site at the same time, but that can be a benefit for the site itself. It gets 2 vehicles out in the time that only one might be able to when there are gaps available. So again, like many things, there's trade-offs in between safety and operations as to how you would want to design this driveway. And like we do within our industry, we do default to Connecticut DOT for that final decision.
Okay. Any further questions from the public?
Mike, Terry here, Terry Bach here, if I may.
Yes.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just five quick comments, just as it relates to the comments earlier about Chick-fil-A. I would absolutely agree that the pandemic has led to an uptick for people using the drive-through and fast food restaurants. However, anybody that has eyeballs and has the memory will tell you that Chick-fil-A has been like that way before the pandemic. So that is, it's not really fair to lump like types of businesses. They either generate a lot of traffic through a lot of areas, including their app, or they don't. And one size does not fit all with that. But the idea that what's going on at Chick-fil-A is now uniquely pandemic induced, If anybody wants to remember back prior to March, that's simply not true. And that Chick-fil-A is a unique animal for its own reasons, both in terms of how busy it is, as well as how successful they are driving business to their site via their app. Related, I'm not sure if it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, for me to ask questions, or if perhaps for me to suggest that the board ask questions. But I would be interested in if the approximate doubling of the trips in and out of 7-Eleven is, based on the traffic industry standards, or if in fact there's a factor in there for app-based business, which is absolutely core to 7-Eleven's strategy on how they drive customers off of 95 to go get gas there. And I'm interested if that's just a, the industry standard based on a gas station in that location with 12 pumps, or if there is in fact a missing number of cars as it relates to app-driven business off of 95. Just to be clear, Mr. Galante, what I think I heard you say about the left turn issue coming out of the site is that, and I'd love for you, but it seems like words were chosen very carefully there, but it sounds like allowing a left turn is the best of the bad ideas of two very bad options. And I'd love clarification on that, but that's certainly the way it sounded to me. And then lastly, as it relates to 2 to 4 deliveries of fuel a week, I believe there's been other documents filed with P&Z that estimate the site at 250,000 gallons a month. If that's true, that would suggest that trailer count is off by at least a factor of 100%. So to get to that volume, you're going to need 8 trucks a week. And that perhaps my numbers are out of context or I misunderstood them, but I'd love to get clarification on that, because the number of trailers we're talking about doesn't add up to, I believe, 7-Eleven's own target numbers for their sales for the site. And that's both that as well as the question about the safety of the site is, I am one of the neighbors, and one of the people who on the last call was scolded for being disingenuous for pointing out 7-Eleven's not necessarily being genuine in facts like these. So, Ms. Suchins, this is the kind of stuff we were talking about in the last meeting. Okay. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
So, Mr. Bach, I got 2 of the 3 questions. One was the similarities of businesses. One was the sales numbers for the fuel, and what was your second point?
But my first broader point about the groups of businesses was that we really need to identify the traffic for this particular site and not just necessarily rely on an industry standard for gas stations. And the Chick-fil-A example that came on this call is a perfect example of that, and I also don't want it to slide through the record that what we're seeing at Chick-fil-A is unique to this time, because it's not. It was that way before the pandemic. That was one. Mike, the second, if any app-based traffic addition is included in the what I heard was an estimate of double the traffic, is that based on industry standard stuff, or is there an additive amount for business for traffic that might be driven there via the app? Third is 2 to 4 deliveries per month for trucks that hold 8,000 gallons. That doesn't add up to 250K a month. Number 3, sorry, and 4, I did not mention this. There seem to be some open questions about the cause of accidents at Trader Joe's. They are running at approximately 1 a month. If you look at it, there's probably a 35 to 40 over the last 3 years. And anybody that's driven by there every day like we do, that for all the mystery that was on this call, there's not a lot of mystery to it. It's really simple. There's a lot of left turns going westbound on Route 1 across, making a left into Trader Joe's. There's only 1 lane painted, but there's enough room for 2 cars. A car in the oncoming left lane stops, the person making a left into Trader Joe's makes a left and gets T-boned by a car passing the guy on the right, on the Trader Joe's side. And that's not just some of the time, that's every single one of them. And we are absolutely asking for exactly the same thing in front of a 7-Eleven because it's the exact same situation. It's one lane painted, but it's 2 lanes wide. If you allow people to make lefts in and out of that, it's not only going to be as bad as Trader Joe's, which is one of the worst intersections in, and then it's probably the second worst one is the 95 off ramp that we talked about. But if you look into that, there's nothing mysterious about what's going on at Trader Joe's, and we're absolutely replicating the same thing. And I would argue that there's probably going to be more left turns into 7-Eleven than there are going to be at Trader Joe's, and chances are it's worse. So those are my 4.
Attorney Suchins, could you talk to the sales number versus the number of deliveries that you're anticipating?
Yep. Mr. Bach is citing representations made by our competition. And they think we're going to do, frankly, more sales than we think we're going to do. And our belief is that they are being, they're protecting their competitive interests and trying to portray this as a bigger station. If we're going to talk about pandemic effects, I think there's an argument that could be made that when everybody is staying home and nobody's commuting, the idea of us building a gas station, maybe we're actually going to have less traffic than what is being predicted because people are going to be staying home more often. It may be the opposite of what you see in a Chick-fil-A situation, but certainly the idea that these numbers that are being floated, with respect to the 250,000 gallons and those sorts of things that were brought up during the P&Z process were not I will be very clear, they were not 7-Eleven numbers. They were presented by the representative from the Motor Vehicle Association, the sort of smaller business owners, and at least one other gas station owner in Darien. So those were not our numbers.
Then perhaps you might be interested in limiting your deliveries to what your projections are.
I'm sorry, I can't see who's speaking to me.
My name is John Turner. I live on 20 Point Woods Road.
Mr. Chairman, I'd rather not get into a back and forth between members of the public. I'll happy to answer any question you want to direct to me, but I don't think we should be having a Q&A with the public.
Well, they're the most impacted by this development, Attorney Suchin, so I'm going to give them the opportunity to speak. And I'm not going to silence the public in my town.
I'm not, Mr. Netter, I'm not asking for you to silence them. I'm just asking, as per standard protocol, that questions be directed to you and then you direct them to me. If we're going to have the public just ask me questions, that's certainly out of the norm.
That is fine, Mr. Chairman. Perhaps Council for 7-Eleven would be interested in limiting their deliveries of fuel to what they say will be true.
Fred, do we have any control to mute people? As I stated earlier, if you are going to speak on this application, I need you to identify yourself for the record and clearly articulate your question.
Okay, this is John Turner from 20 Point Woods Road. And my question is, considering the argument over the fuel deliveries, is 7-Eleven willing to limit their deliveries to what they state as their projected deliveries per week?
Okay, your question is noted. I'm going to finish Mr. Bach's questions and then I'll come back to you. Mr. Galante and Mr. Adams, there were a couple of other questions regarding the traffic study, which seems to be where we're stuck right now. I think Mr. Bach raises a very good point in that Chick-fil-A is a different draw than Popeyes because if you drive down the Post Road, you can drive right through the Popeyes drive-through, but you can't get into Chick-fil-A. So is there a factoring for the brand of business versus just the actual type of business?
I'll go first and just start. Mike Galante. No, there are no factors or adjustments for a fast food restaurant. And I'll agree with the comment that the Chick-fil-A is certainly a busier place, and it was certainly busy for the pandemic. I was only referring that what I've seen recently at the Chick-fil-A is that it's busier than what I've seen in the past. But they are probably the busiest fast food restaurant that I know of around the whole area, without a doubt. But there are no factors that we apply for Chick-fil-A. The only factor that CONDOT applies, it would be to Dunkin' Donuts versus a Starbucks, for example, or a, I don't want to call it a no-name coffee shop, but a no-name coffee shop. The Dunkin' Donuts has a much higher trip generation rate that we have to use. But I can tell you other stores such as Starbucks, I've seen them, they're much busier now than they were a year ago because of the pandemic, as far as drive-throughs. But there are no adjustments that we can use to apply to Chick-fil-A versus a Burger King, for example. And the other question I think was about the apps for someone attracting a customer to the 7-Eleven store or whatever store it might be. All the information we use that CONDOT expects us to use, there's nothing in there that says we should put a factor of 25% because I can go on my telephone and order a hamburger before I get there. That's not available yet, but I'm sure it'll be available in the future as far as us modeling that type of use.
But you can understand the point where a type of business that is app friendly and actively marketing via applications, drawing people off the highway is going to generate more traffic than, say, a mobile station that's just not doing that.
I would have to agree with that, yes, but there's no way of us modeling that at this point in time.
Okay. And then there was a last question since the cause of accidents at Trader Joe's. I think you actually mentioned the fact that we've got one lane, but it acts like two in your presentation. What are your thoughts on that aspect of it, which is, I don't know westbound from eastbound on the Post Road, but if you're heading into Darien and you try to take a left into Trader Joe's and the guy in the left lane stops and the guy in the right turn lane, because I take that right turn lane very frequently, that's where a lot of the accidents do happen. I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm in that right lane to try to take a right on Old Kings Highway North to get to my office, and inevitably someone stopped in the left lane and some car just juts out in front of me.
Yeah. When I was referring to that intersection before, I wasn't talking about the Trader Joe's intersection. I was talking about the intersection with the traffic signal at Old Kings Highway. But as far as I'm making a left turn into Trader Joe's and the guy traveling straight through, let's call it eastbound towards Norwalk, stops for me, and the car in the right lane that's going to turn right at the traffic signal passes on the right, that is a concern. And the person on the right actually has the right to pass on the right. They're in a right turn lane there. But you can actually pass a car on a painted shoulder around a car that's waiting to turn left into a driveway such as 7-Eleven. That's permitted.
So you would end up with a similar situation.
At the 7-Eleven driveway, there are wide paved shoulders today with the white shoulder lines that, it used to be a lane in the past, it was a lane actually. Now it's just one lane each direction with wide shoulders, yes. So yeah, the potential is there, correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I just interject a little bit in there?
You don't need to interject. I was just switching to you.
Great. To the comparison with the Trader Joe's intersection, I think there are a couple differences here. Number one is, as has been pointed out, there are two distinctly striped lanes in front of that Trader Joe's, so that left lane stopping in advance of a traffic signal while a right turn movement continues is not really the same situation as what we have in front of the Duchess currently. There's, as Mr. Galante said, there is a wide shoulder, but that is only one travel lane while if a car was waiting to turn left into the site, there may be opportunity for a car to bypass it. But for that left turning vehicle turning into the 7-Eleven, I do not think that there would be instances where a vehicle on Post Road headed towards the 95 ramp would stop and another vehicle would travel around that vehicle, as happens at the Trader Joe's. So I don't think it's the same situation, because you don't have two striped lanes approaching a signal like you do at the Trader Joe's entrance there.
It's going to be exactly
I think actually, what I think I would interject there is the person turning left would probably be turning left into Birch Lane, and the person turning left into this site would be turning left, and the person would go around the person turning into Birch Lane and right into the oncoming traffic. I think that's a very similar situation to the situation we have at Trader Joe's.
Well, the Birch Road is still a couple hundred feet away from this driveway, so there's plenty of visibility for that vehicle turning left to see a vehicle come around. You know, if they are diverting their path to go around a vehicle turning left, it's not happening at the same point, which is what is the situation at Trader Joe's. There's one point where you have to cross two lanes of traffic to get into Trader Joe's. That doesn't exist here.
Okay, then how about what is it? Dynamic performance. The same situation there. You actually created the same situation twice.
I think it's important to note with dynamic performance that we're talking about two vehicles and exiting there in the morning and maybe 10 in the afternoon. It's not a high volume, is what I'm saying. So yes, there will be interactions between opposing driveways, and that happens at many locations along Post Road. It's a very common situation where you have driveways that interact with each other. So I don't see this as being any type of unique safety issue due to the fact that there's a driveway across the street or a slightly wider travel lane. I think that Trader Joe's situation with two travel lanes that a left turn has to cross is a different situation where you don't necessarily see both vehicles in the two different travel lanes. Everything is much more visible at this location because it's that one point.
So if this is still based on my question, am I still allowed to talk, Mr. Chairman?
Actually, Mr. Bach, if you give me a second, I just want to work through the rest of the questions so we have all the answers, and then I'll reserve time for you to comment.
Go ahead.
Michael, can I inject one resident thought? This is Mike Lorelli.
Can I just finish up with this line and then I'll open it up to new questions. Mr. Adams, so there was a question about studies for specific businesses. Do you agree with Mr. Galante's assessment of that?
I do, and I guess I would just like to point out that in my professional opinion, and I have done a number of gas station projects and a number of fast food projects through my career, Chick-fil-A is much more of a unique use compared to other fast food restaurants than 7-Eleven is compared to other gas stations. So while there may be people that specifically seek out a 7-Eleven, and that's certainly as a business what we are hoping, 7-Eleven is very similar in its offerings to other gas stations, whereas Chick-fil-A is an incredibly unique, and especially to this market. I mean, it's only been in Connecticut for maybe seven years now. It's still new to market. They're still developing new sites and trying to fill in geographic gaps. There are a number of gas stations in close proximity to this site. Chick-fil-A is a much more unique trip generator compared to other fast food restaurants. We would consider 7-Eleven to be as similar to other gas stations as can be. And the trip generation rates, while they don't specifically include app-based diversions of sales, I would note that is going to be applied to other uses as well. But the trip generation data is across the entire country, and some of the data points are much bigger generators. If anyone has been down to New Jersey and been to a Wawa, that's it's a unique animal in terms of, it's in almost that realm of Chick-fil-A because you can get sandwiches and things like that at a Wawa. And there's other data points from larger format stations in Texas or across the South that might be more of a destination than here in Connecticut. So it's not specifically included, but it is the best data that we have. And there's also an opportunity that this data may be overstating the number of trips. There's nothing that points to it could only be more trips than what is saying. There's a chance that this site could generate fewer trips than what our data is saying as well. Where it's an average condition that is forecasted the best we can.
Okay, so I think that was a long-winded way of saying yes, you agree with Mr. Galante?
Yes.
Okay. And then the app-based question, do you agree with Mr. Galante? A simple yes or no would be fine.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bach, you had a follow-up question.
Yeah, just very quickly as it relates to Trader Joe's and it being not, and this intersection being not similar. That's not right. What happens every single time with that, and like I said, we've looked at the data, there's between 10 and 15 accidents a year in that spot. It's basically one a month roughly. And it's, like I said, it's always the same one, and it's caused by exactly the same thing. The light turns red on Route 1 going towards Norwalk. Traffic backs up. Somebody stops to create a space for somebody making a left turn in Trader Joe's, and then they get broadsided by the person in the right-hand lane who thinks and that right turn only lane to go to 95 hasn't started yet, but they see that it is, and they didn't see somebody turning in. And that is the accident, the substantial part of the time. If you fast forward up to the Dutchess site, there's another light that turns red. Somebody's going to stop to make a left-hand turn to go into Dutchess, and somebody's going to go around on the right because that's the way they get on 95 South. Is it exactly the same? No. Is it substantially the same? It absolutely is. It's going to be the exact same thing, and I would leave it to Mr. Galante and Mr. Adams, who have forgotten more about this stuff than I know. But when you make left turns across two lanes of traffic with lights in front of them, bad things happen. That's what's going on at Trader Joe's, and we're going to introduce that here. Just wrapping up very quickly, Ms. Suchins, if I had the numbers wrong about 250 gallons a month, let's try it this way. If you could you tell us what the size of the tanks that 7-Eleven is putting in, the storage tanks underneath these pumps? Can't hear you.
Sorry. I believe they're on our site plan. Luke DiStefano is our civil engineer. He could, Luke, if you could just confirm what the size of the tanks are.
Sure. Good evening. For the record, Luke DiStefano with Bowler Engineering. There are two 20,000 gallon tanks proposed, with 20,000 gallons being regular, and then the second 20,000 gallon being split between diesel and premium, 12 and 8K respectively.
Finally, as it relates to Mr. Adams, gas stations, as it relates to traffic, and nobody really knows, I guess the thing that I would point to and actually specifically into his comparison to Wawa, the scale of this store is unlike anything in Darien, Norwalk, in terms of 12 pumps and 4,000 square feet. And frankly, it looks and feels much, much more like a Wawa and a destination with its 12 pumps and its 4,000 square feet. So I wouldn't, we're simply not in our neighborhood going to allow any suggestion that this is a normal neighborhood gas station. And that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bach. Okay, we had a question. I didn't catch the person's name, and the question was to you, Ms. Suchins, if this number is truly an issue with the number of deliveries, will you limit the number of deliveries?
Frankly, I don't think that's in your jurisdiction.
If I believe that it's a safety issue, it 100% is within my jurisdiction.
We can agree to disagree, but I'm not going to agree to limit the fuel deliveries in the context of a location approval.
Okay. I saw a few more people from the public who wish to.
David Smith would like to speak.
I'm sorry, your name?
David Smith.
Yeah,
Okay,
Mike Lorelli is one.
And Barbara
Start with-
Paul, when you get a chance too, I'd like to speak also.
Okay. Start with David.
Kennedy.
Where would you like to start, sir?
Go ahead. Do you have some public comment to make?
First of all, it's several. I approach it this way. You're being told, or it's being suggested, that you are to evaluate your job in the context of a gas station site approval. But we all know that a good part of what you're supposed to address is the safety issues. And the safety issues derive from the traffic issues. And the traffic issues derive not from a gas station alone, but the other uses to which the site is being intended. It was very informative, interesting to hear the discussion about other unintended or unanticipated consequences at other locations where we see problems along the post road. Clearly, if you have a site which is a gas station and a 4,000-foot grocery store, you are going to have a different traffic impact than you have as a gas station. And with all due respect to the learned engineers, there is no separate category for gas stations with 4,000 square foot super convenience stores, as the National Association of Convenience Stores would describe this animal. And there are very few of them still in this country because this is a new concept that has just been rolled out by 7-Eleven. To imagine that 7-Eleven would put this level of investment into a site only expecting to do as well as a standard neighborhood gas station and at the same time put a 4,000 square foot grocery store is asking the commission to check its brains at the door and not take a close look at the facts on the ground. In terms of the actual traffic study itself, it's clear that several things have been left out of the analysis. One of the first things I'd like to point out, which nobody has mentioned this evening, is that there is a pedestrian crosswalk between Dynamic Athletics and the office building and the property adjacent to that would intersect right where the 7-Eleven property starts. Under Connecticut state law, if somebody steps off the curb into that crosswalk, the cars that are driving down the post road are required by law to stop for the person in that crosswalk. Nowhere in any of the conversations have the applicants and traffic engineer or in the town's consultant review that issue been addressed. And I will point out that that crosswalk was put there by the state DOT, to whom we are now going to defer so many other decisions. The facts on the ground turning off of Birch Road, which is where I live, require a experienced driver to take into account traffic coming from the downtown Trader Joe's side, looking over a crest, monitoring for two exiting driveways on our side of the post road coming out of the strip mall with the liquor store in it. Now the heightened use of the Orange Fitness and Italian food takeout, the traffic coming out of the Dynamic Athletics, which is a temporary use. That property is to soon go onto the market and will probably that property will probably be redeveloped for higher use in the short term. I realize it's very difficult to take these things into account, and perhaps you're not even allowed to. But Dynamic Athletics, as you know, has been a restaurant use in the past with much higher site utilization than it currently has. And I know for a fact that that property is going to be subject to redevelopment within the relative short time. It's not on the market yet, but it will be shortly. And that use will intensify. And we are assuming in our traffic study that we get a similar use to other comparable activities pursuant to the characterization of this as a gas station with a convenience store, perhaps. But that's not what 7-Eleven wants to do here. They wouldn't spend all this money if it were. It wouldn't be economic. I think, you know, the issues about the left-hand turns and the safety issues, what we're talking about is a left-hand turn coming out of Birch into an attempted left-hand turn coming out of this proposed 7-Eleven site. There's no room to do both of those turns under most traffic conditions. So you have to wait for the left-hand turn coming out of Dutchess before you're safe taking the left-hand turn coming out of Birch. You've got about 150 feet, maybe 100 and a quarter. The closing rates at the kinds of speeds you'd have to generate to make the turn is going to create crashes. We've already got, you know, one a month in that area. And the next one, I'm afraid, you know, when you've got the people zooming out of the 7-Eleven site because they've got stuck on the property for several minutes in F-graded conditions on site, trying quickly now to make up for time, is going to plow into the poor mom who's late taking their kid to nursery school. So, you know, I think the bottom line is that you all, despite the protestations of the contrary about, you know, what the bounds, meets and bounds of what it is that you're supposed to be looking at, which is a so-called gas station, the safety issues and the practical on the ground issues are an awful lot worse than what we're talking about. And there's some significant elements of this fact pattern that haven't even been looked at. Now, you know, it's obvious that you've got to at least get out of the traffic consultants some sort of answer on, I mean, you can process all that you want to, but on the specific traffic stuff, they haven't even addressed simple things like the crosswalk. You know, it begs questions about the credibility of the work. I think that's really what we've got to address here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Galante or Mr. Adams, was the crosswalk at any point involved in the analysis of the safety of this location and potential safety issues?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it was. We completed an analysis of Birch Road as well as the crosswalk, which was included in a November memo submitted to the town, reviewed by Hardesty and Hanover. It was an interim element of what we discussed. We conducted a field review of the crosswalk itself. As has been previously mentioned, the crosswalk was recently installed by Connecticut DOT, just north of Birch Road, in between Birch Road and the project site. We had a field engineer review available site distance, which indicated that the crosswalk was appropriately located. And we don't feel there's any known safety issue associated with the crosswalk itself, but we certainly did take a look at that.
Follow-up question?
Hang on one second. Mr. Galante, would you agree with that analysis?
Yes, yeah, the DOT did their own analysis before they selected the installation of that crosswalk. And that's done by the main office up in Newington. They make the decision for all folks.
But is that a decision that factored into this into this new development? Or is
No,
that based on current
not-
condition?
Not directly. It's based on the geometry of that intersection, the placement of the crosswalk. As mentioned, the sight lines for someone crossing the street. It's an uncontrolled intersection. The pedestrian, as someone said, once that pedestrian steps into the road at that crosswalk, all traffic must stop. We all know that happens sometimes, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. But the pedestrian has a right of way at a crosswalk.
Okay. Mr. Smith, you had a question?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that the site engineer study that was just referenced was done at 10:15 in the morning during the COVID on a weekday.
Okay, duly noted.
It's not credible.
I saw a couple of other people from the public. Mr. Lorelli was looking to have a comment.
Yes, thank you. And I'll make this very brief and hopefully not repetitive. The exit 1395 South exit today is an accident waiting to happen. There are 2 lanes when you exit if you're making a left turn going westbound onto the post road. If you're making that left turn and you're in the left of those 2 lanes and somebody with a 4x4 pulls to your right, you are blinded and you cannot see the onset of traffic. You're blinded. And I personally think that adding to this problem is not a good idea, let alone a tractor trailer trying to cross through that very limited and very narrow intersection. Separately, just as a point of reference, I've been rear-ended there at 11 o'clock in the morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Levinson, you wish to be heard?
Yes, and if it's possible, I think it'd be easier if I can share my screen. Is that possible for some slides I put together?
Fred?
So you can select the screen at the bottom of the GoToMeeting interface. If you hover your cursor over the bottom of your screen, you should see an option to share your screen.
Okay. All right, so there's been a lot that we've talked about tonight, and I was planning to cover some of it, so I'm gonna go through this not as I had written out, so I apologize for I'm not as crisp as I otherwise would be. The first thing I'd like to say is thank you to all the commissioners for your time and energy serving our town. We appreciate you working in service of our community. One of the questions that has come up tonight is it sounds like people are sort of regarding this traffic study as the Bible. There's a lot that goes into it, and I understand that both of the engineers are limited in the tools that they have. And some of the conversation has been around the inherent inaccuracy of this. They're using the best data that they have and the best models that they have. And certainly each of us does that in what we do. But there's been a lot of change, and I wanted to visualize some of that so that we can understand exactly what is going in. Back in July, when the first study came out, the trip origination data, it showed approximately 50% was coming in the top right of the screen from Norwalk and returning there. 30% was coming off of exit 13 and going back onto 95, and then 20% was coming up out of downtown and then returning. And this was based on existing travel patterns of the adjacent roadways and logical routes for site patrons, which you would think would be something we'd have some other data to go by, but none has been presented. In December, the first time, the applicant's traffic engineer abruptly changed these numbers, and really there was no, to my knowledge, there was no explanation as to why. Now we go from 50 to 40% coming from Norwalk. The numbers from 95 were cut in half. We've added 5% of traffic on Birch Road, and the numbers coming out of downtown are now 40%. There was some conversation about the 1-lane and 2-lane exit, and certainly modifying these numbers in what appears to be there doesn't seem to be a scientific method behind this. It modifies, obviously, the outputs of the model. We'll come back to that in just a moment. It's not clear why these changes are being made, and it's not clear what the basis for them are, the bases are. Now, on the last day of the year, of course, we got the final update, and these numbers changed again. I don't know what to make of these. Surely the real world will be different, but you need to understand that as you're assessing site suitability and this location, and all this attention is being paid to the sort of the specifics of the traffic model, this is what you're looking at, is some sort of back and forth that's going on. We have no data from Dutchess, which has been in business for a long time, to understand how many cars were coming in and out in the years prior to the pandemic. We certainly don't know how many are coming in and out today. No one has thought to count that. 7-Eleven certainly has reams of data on similar locations, and we'll come back to that in a minute. They must have some estimate of where the traffic is going to come from. Instead, we have numbers from a third-party engineer, and there he's going back and forth with the town's engineer. So it's not clear to me how reliable this data will be. And obviously, we talked about Chick-fil-A. I presented this slide in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission back in December, and I wanted to point out there was a question from Commissioner Fullington about the difference between 1-lane and 2-lane. Unfortunately, the applicant's engineer has removed all the data on the 1-lane exit, which Mr. Galante thinks is the appropriate way to handle the egress. Now, one of the things that's notable in the last data that we have for the shared lane exit is that at the peak rush hour, you're going to be backing up all the way across the lot. It's not my data. I'm just visually presenting the traffic engineer's work. I also want to touch base on one aspect of this that was added in. Birch Road was added as sort of a thoroughfare to get to the site. This is the road that we're talking about. We've got speed bumps on the road. It certainly doesn't look like this is an area that we want to see a doubling in traffic, which I believe is the most recent estimate from the applicant's engineer. This was covered in planning and zoning, the discrepancy in the crash data. There is and has been a lot of crashes, in the vicinity of the site. Keep in mind that the intersections that are covered by the traffic engineer don't address any traffic that is flowing to and from I-95 North. So to the extent that you've got a customer that's seeking out the 7-Eleven that's traveling on I-95 North, the intersections that person would take, are not covered in the traffic study. Some attention was paid to the Trader Joe's site, and that's where that traffic would have to return to 95. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I would like to cover some of the aspects, at least as I understand it, of what the Zoning Board of Appeals is supposed to do here. You are supposed to assess site suitability. And there are ways that the things that you need to consider in making that decision. In a related case, I want to point out that the precedent is that commissioners are not bound to adopt the opinion of the plaintiff's traffic engineer. Commissioners are entitled to rely upon testimony of other witnesses as well as their own personal knowledge of subjects which do not require expert knowledge, such as traffic congestion and street safety. One of the things that, or in terms of your assessing what you're doing tonight, we have to go back in terms of all the precedents as to what the Connecticut Supreme Court has laid out that you need to do. And I'll quote this. It says, to support the finding, in this case, the Zoning Board of Appeals should demonstrate that due consideration was given to two basic requirements which an applicant must prove to justify the approval of a location for the sale of gasoline. The first is the suitability of the proposed location in view of proximity to schools, churches, theaters, or playhouses, or other places of public gathering, intersecting streets, traffic conditions, width of highway, and the effect of public travel. The second is that the use of the proposed location will not imperil the safety of the public. So what we can do with this is, in effect, create a checklist for the Zoning Board of Appeals to assess this application. there are two basic requirements. The first is suitability, and we've got those items listed on the left, and we can all discuss and have differing opinions, expert or otherwise, of those. And the second is safety. This case goes on from this precedent, and we can apply those here. And again, quoting from the opinion, that it was quite apparent that some members of the board were well acquainted with the area, and the comments made by them indicated that they were well aware of certain dangerous conditions which already existed. Now, this pertained to a situation near New Haven, right off of 95, and despite the years that go by, there are a lot of similarities to this case and what we're talking about tonight. They continued that such an arrangement would undoubtedly increase traffic congestion in the area. Obviously, the members of the board had personal knowledge of the situation, and they were entitled to take that knowledge into consideration. In terms of all these issues, clearly this site is not in close proximity to any schools, churches, theaters, playhouses, or other public places of public gathering that I'm aware of. But we can clearly see there is ample discussion and disagreement about the impact on the intersecting streets, traffic, the width of the highway, and the effect on public travel, and of course, safety. The proposed location must not imperil the safety of the public. Continuing on, another precedent, Gulf Oil versus the Board of Selectmen. The board, again, quoting from the opinion, the board was not bound to adopt the opinion of the traffic engineer, who stated that the traffic conditions in the vicinity were such that the operation of the station at the proposed location would not create an unusual or undue hazard. The board's members were entitled to regard any facts concerning the location, traffic, and surrounding circumstances which they had learned by personal observation to the same extent as though they were offered in evidence. It continues lower in stating that the application was denied, quote, because of the school bus stop at the corner and the hazardous conditions of travel. The board did in effect say that a gasoline service station at the location in question would imperil the safety of the public. Since it reasonably could and did so find, its refusal for the certificate was justified. On the right of this, I've noted the 7-Eleven site location in the lower right area, and then I've superimposed the current bus stops for the Darien Public School System this school year. And you can see that immediately adjacent to the 7-Eleven, the Darien High School and Middlesex Middle School have a bus stop. Up Birch Road, there are numerous stops for Oxbridge Elementary School, Middlesex, and the high school. And as you expand further out, outside of the narrow review area, but clearly within the logical review area of the impact of this project, you can see more and more bus stops for Royal and Tokenique as well. Mr. Galante has done a fine job. He's clearly quite professional and talented, and I'm not surprised that he is regarded as a leading individual in this domain. His words tonight were very even-handed. I do want to highlight aspects and his own words in his peer review, and clearly, what he wrote down is less even-handed than some of the comments tonight. Overall, it is our opinion, this is Hardesty and Hanover, that the redevelopment of the subject property will add a significant level of traffic to area roadways and nearby intersections. In other section, it is our opinion that this is a potential significant safety condition. It continues, we consider there's a significant safety concern, and the additional site traffic estimated for the 7-Eleven development could have a significant impact on these vehicles waiting to complete the left turn. There's been a lot of discussion about left turns tonight. And it continues on and on. I don't need to read all of this. The last thing I want to touch on is 7-Eleven is presently developing 3 other sites that I'm aware of in Connecticut, one in Danbury, one in West Haven, and one in Wallingford. They're all approximately the same size as this one. Not exact, but very close. And we presented in front of Planning and Zoning some of those differences. There's some key things to visualize here to understand, given the size of those locations and given the space that we have at this location. So this is the Wallingford site. You can see the Merritt Parkway traveling across the lower left, sort of from the middle left down to the middle center, and the North Colony Road. The proposed 7-Eleven site is presently vacant next to a Sonic restaurant. The thing to take away here is that the volume of peak hour vehicles is about the same as what we're modeling. And again, depending on which model that you want to use, whether it's July, whether it's November, December 1, or December 2, approximately the same number of peak hour vehicles turning left into the site. Wallingford has 6 lanes of traffic and a stoplight. So to give you a sense of where this site is easily handled, that's what they've got. They're also proposing lane modifications to handle the new traffic that's coming in. Looking at the other 2 sites, Danbury off of on Federal Road, again, a 4-lane road at an intersection with a traffic signal. And in West Haven, you've got between 5 and 6 lanes of traffic at the development site, again, with a traffic signal. None of those exist in terms of the what we have, and I think that you need to understand that context as you make your suitability determination and you think about safety and imperiling the public. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Levinson. Is that packet of material submitted in the ZBA record, Woody?
I can email it to I will email it to you this evening.
Okay. All right. I saw Barbara wanted to make some comments. I would encourage people to try and keep your comments brief at this hour.
I'm quick. Sorry, I know it's late. Barbara Paul, I live in Villager Pond, which is about 1/8 of a mile down the road from the proposed site. 2 things. Everybody talked about this traffic study and it not having any weekend information. My question is, why not? Why are we rolling over and saying, oh, we're not going to ask what happens on a Saturday or a Sunday? I mean, that's crazy. Saturday's the worst and Sunday's the worst. Why are we letting them get away with, oh, the client did not submit traffic information for a Saturday? Fight back. You got money. Tell them to do a Saturday study. Maybe from an F to a Z on a Saturday. Number 2, if you were all watching the last P&Z presentation, one of the women cited an awesome article that was written by 7-Eleven, not her competition, but by 7-Eleven, who cited that this new corporate store is running 30% ahead of plan. I'd like to know if Miss Amy Suchalier can tell us if her truck traffic, her
excuse me, ma'am, Barbara,
will be 30% ahead.
Excuse me. I am not going to tolerate name calling. Okay.
I thought that was her name. I'm sorry. I only see on my phone it says SOUCH. I didn't see the rest of it. Can't see the rest.
It's
anyway,
pronounced Attorney Suchins, and if you could please address her accordingly, I would appreciate it.
I'd like to know if she is putting numbers in that indicate, since their corporate stores are 30% ahead of plan, as the Darien store is meant to be a corporate store, are her trucks, gas, traffic, crime, and safety up 30%? That's my other question. That's all I have to ask.
My apologies, Attorney Suchin. Did you factor in your PR materials in your calculations, in your numbers? And maybe it's a better question for your traffic analyst.
So again, the representation that was made at P&Z was made by, I don't remember which member of the public, but it was a different member of the public who had found some materials about increase in sort of overperformance in certain stores. Those stores are urban locations. There was one in, I believe it was downtown Dallas. There was one in, I think it was Washington, D.C. They were urban format stores that were overperforming. They were not this type of location. So I frankly don't think it's an apples to apples comparison. And just to answer the question about the weekend data, not just to keep it summarizing, both Mr. Galante and Mr. Adams noted that the reason weekend data wasn't provided was because there was no updated information that DOT could provide, that if we did counts, they would be low because of COVID, which everybody understands. And so there was, they used their traffic engineering expertise to make the necessary extrapolations. Think it will be, I think as Mr. Galante said, somewhat higher than the weekday afternoon peak, but certainly that's the reason why. It was not an attempt to to hide anything. It's frankly a fact of the world that we're living in right now.
Okay, understood. Mr. Galante did say, though, that just to be clear on the testimony, that the weekend numbers would be more disadvantageous to this site. Okay, anybody else from the public? I know it's been running on a little bit, but we've got two people, Patrick and M. Kennedy. So Patrick, why don't you start first? And please, I encourage you to keep your comments brief.
Sure, I'll be brief. Thank you, Mike. My question or concern really for Attorney Suchins.
Sorry, Patrick, your last name for the record?
Patrick Horan, 5 Birch Road.
Thank you.
So safety all around is our concern. I'm specifically questioning the gas deliveries in the trucks. And we're being told that the deliveries will be no different than the average of a nearby gas station. But my question for Attorney Suchins is does 7 & I Holdings, the parent of 7-Eleven, have a history of acquiring gas stations and significantly increasing the total sales?
So I think the question was, does the parent company acquire?
I'm not sure I understood what you were asking.
Your client's parent company, do they have a history of acquiring gas stations and dramatically increasing the sales of the location?
You mean has 7-Eleven acquired existing stations that were not 7-Eleven stations?
And converted them and thereby dramatically increased the sales?
I have no information about that, nor frankly, I think it's relevant to the ZBA's analysis.
Really, just as a concerned citizen, I look at the materials and see that you have a track record of buying gas stations and converting them to a 7-Eleven, increasing the volume over 40%. So I just, as that relates to your comment on being in line with the average gas station in the area, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I apologize for not going back and forth through the chairman. I'm just trying
that's okay. I understand your point. Amy, I understand your point as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy wished to be heard.
Yes, hi, Michael Kennedy, Royal Road. Just a couple of quick points. Thank you for your time. First is there is traffic data for Saturday available in a DOT study. It's 1702533. I'm glad to send that to you. It's available on, from 2005. That shows the DOT study on the rest areas that are both northbound and southbound across Connecticut, that renovation. Saturday is actually 37% higher than during the week. So if we apply that across the board, that will help understand the traffic patterns. To clarify, also similar to the rest areas, this has a quick service and convenience store, not just a gas station. So I would like to note, that's comparing this to a gas station. This also has other services offered. And as we know, Saturday, if you've ever driven to Costco, it's quite significant. So those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Is there anyone else in the public that wishes to be heard? Lois.
My name is Lois Schneider, and I live on Maywood Road. It's a very specific question. At the Traffic Police Commission meeting last week, there was this discussion on queuing coming out of, I believe, the 7-Eleven, that in peak periods could have 2 to 3 minutes of backup wait time. And I'm not sure what that was an answer to, but I thought it had to do with peak traffic and single lane exit versus 2-lane exit. But that was a comment that I understood from Mr. Galante, and I would, if he remembers this point, I would appreciate a clarification, because I think it would be useful for you to hear it also.
That's in the applicant's traffic report. That's the results of their analysis, that you would have a couple-minute delay coming out of the driver during peak hours. I believe it was the afternoon peak. And Jason can maybe confirm what time period that was. and if it was 1 lane or 2 lanes. I think it was a 1 lane approach, 1 lane exit. I don't recall exactly.
Just to add to that, yes, that is the result of the analysis. That is for the left turn lane out. It's a little bit. It's about 110-second delay in the morning and about a 200-second delay in the afternoon. So about 2 minutes and about 3 minutes. I mean that is considered to be conservative analysis, but that is what the data shows us. Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to raise that because that seemed to me like a long period of time for people to be patient in trying to make their turns.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to be heard, or can we continue with the rest of the application? Kevin?
Mike, yeah, just one quick but critical question for attorneys. Cited certain case law options. One member of the public saw as the appropriate standard that we should be looking at. He cited, I think it was Atlantic Refining, and particularly he pointed out that one of the critical criteria is the safety of the proposed location and the safety in the area. At the September hearing, you cited different case law as the controlling document here. You cited one Elmcroft Stanford LLC, and in that decision, the court didn't specifically call out safety. I think they called out effect on public traffic, among other issues. So my question to you is, which is the appropriate standard that we should be looking at, and do you agree or disagree with the case law in Atlantic Refining, which specifically calls out safety as one of the criteria?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if I was on mute. I was actually trying to read the fine print on the Atlantic Refining case. I couldn't quite see it on my screen, but I think the easiest way to talk about it is it's cited in our original variance location, and I did talk about the one Elmcroft decision, which is actually in the repairer context, which is a little different. So yes, but cited in our narrative, the language regarding the imperiling the public safety was cited in the case law, is referenced in Mr. Maslin's materials as well. And the underlying issue that I think everybody has dealt with for a number of years is that technically the statute with this language has been repealed, but in the absence of better guidance, I think everybody thinks that is still the best guidance that you can look at. So, while admittedly repealed, the language, I actually cite the Chevron oil case, which I think is about the same. I can confirm when I have the chance to look at the case that Mr. Levinson cited, but I think the language is the same and would include the not imperiling the safety of the public language.
And I would just point out, I think where the Elmcroft case stands is the appellate court found that statute was in fact not repealed. But either way, it sounds like we have a consensus that we can look at whether this imperils public safety, and we can look at the effect on public traffic.
Right. That I think there were some minor differences between the ZBA sitting in the context, or frankly any agency sitting in the context of the two motor vehicle provisions, but most of the factors are the same. But yes, I do think that if we're looking at the what we all think, that the public safety is included.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we've heard a tremendous amount of testimony on traffic.
Mr. Chairman, I have, David Smith, I have one more comment that I neglected to make. May I have 2 seconds?
Sure.
We've been talking about traffic. They also have signage in there. I'd just like to remind you that you dealt with signage in town. I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before that. It's been well debated. There were hundreds of people that had input into it. It was carefully done. The applicant's shown no hardship and they no basis for asking for a variance. And that part of their application should be denied.
Okay,
Thank
sir,
you.
we're going to address that in a little bit. Attorney Suchins, do you have anything further on the location?
I guess my question is a procedural one. Based on Attorney Maslin's submitted materials, there was a presentation that I think he was going to make regarding the location approval. If he still intends to do that, I think it makes sense to do that now before we turn to signage so we can discuss all of the location approval. If he's not intending to do that, then I'm happy to turn to signage.
Okay, so if you're done with your presentation on location approval to this point, Attorney Maslin, I've seen the same presentation. Is your intention to take that position tonight at this hearing, or have you retracted that position?
I will address it briefly. It's in my presentation. I limited my comments to the traffic consultant's remarks before because that's how you presented it, but I did intend to address that, and if you want me to do it now, I'm happy to take a couple of minutes.
Your time is now. Any presentation you want to make regarding the location approval, now's the time to make it.
Okay, can I have the screen, please?
One moment.
All right, I think. Okay, that should be the PowerPoint. Hopefully you just see my PowerPoint presentation starting with the opening slide.
Yeah.
All right. Just as an overview, I do talk about text amendments. Oops, I may have the wrong, I think I got the wrong presentation. Just bear with me for a second, please.
Looks like your P and Z presentation.
You know what? Would it be possible to take a 5-minute recess? While Mr. Maslin puts things together, I just need to refill my.
Yeah, you could do that.
Okay, so we're just going to take a 5-minute recess. If anyone needs to do anything, I'll give plenty of announcement when we get back.
Okay.
Okay. I'm back. Attorney Maslin, do you have your presentation ready?
I'm ready, yep.
Attorney Suchins, are you on? He is not, so we're waiting for Attorney Suchins to come back.
I'm here. Sorry, I was on mute.
That's okay. Do you have the members of your team that you need here and ready?
I think if we're going to do Mr. Maslin's presentation first, everybody should be back.
Okay, great. Do I have all my board members? Jeff, are you back? Barb, you're here. Dan and Kevin. Kevin's here. So we're just waiting on Mr. Williams. Oh, you're here. Great, perfect. Okay. Mr. Maslin, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. The presentation covers both the sign variance, which I'll just kind of gloss over. The essence there is there's no hardship having signs out by the street or personal preferences and therefore self-created hardships. That's all I'll say. The rest is in the PowerPoint and in the, I guess just in the PowerPoint. Location approval. In essence, this is what happened with the location approval. In 2003, the legislature did a number of things. I think it intended to eliminate ZBA location approvals across the board in terms of sale of fuel, which is what we're dealing with here, sale of motor vehicles, and service of motor vehicles. Those come under three separate sets of statutes, but the one we're dealing with here, because it does not involve a typical gas station with a repair shop, is only the sale of fuel, and that's 14.322. 14.322 actually set up a whole procedure with a filing fee, a hearing procedure, and a time frame to work with, and it had an appeal provision in it as well. I was able to retrieve a copy of the 2002 version of the statute before the repeal. One of the things that's confusing here is there is case law that addresses the question of whether Section 1455, which deals with repair licenses, whether that was repealed. In the Public Act that repealed 14.322, the legislature also repealed 1455, but a separate Public Act that year amended 1455, but did nothing to 14.322. So where the case law says 1455, although it looks like it was repealed in the official published statute books, but was not because of the conflict between the two public acts, you don't have that conflict with respect to 322. So consequently, this gas station approval, which is only a review of the sale of gasoline here and diesel, and not a 7-Eleven specifically, is really not, you're really not acting as an arm of the motor vehicle department or an arm of the state. The whole purpose of this was to eliminate the duplication where gas stations did not have to go to two separate boards, ZBA under the old system as an arm of motor vehicle. In addition to that, the planning or the zoning commission or planning and zoning commission for special permit and site plan review. And I've laid that out in my PowerPoint material, PowerPoint presentation, and I've given you copies of the relevant backup documents, particularly the current version of 14.321, the old 14.322, and the Office of Legislative Research memo that says specifically that this process was terminated, and it remains terminated only with respect to gas stations. I'd also note in passing that Section 1124 of your regulations says, and this is, I think, the one that where some of the confusion lies, says the following: the ZBA shall be authorized to hear and decide upon all requests to locate motor vehicle sales, service, and repair uses as specified in the general statute. It doesn't say sales of gas or fuel sales. And that's where the confusion lies. Now, if, and I know you've spent months literally hearing testimony and reading things and all of that information is going to be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission for its consideration as well. But the most significant point here is a location approval, even when it did exist for motor vehicle, for gas stations, did not supersede zoning regulations. And the case I cite here is Clark Heating Oils, a Connecticut Supreme Court case versus Zoning Board of Appeals, decided in 1970. This case, a copy of the decision is in the backup materials. It couldn't be any clearer. A certificate of approval cannot be properly issued for a location where a gasoline station would be in violation of zoning regulations. In this case, there is such a violation because this gas station is inextricably tied to a 7-Eleven, a retail food establishment, a fast food establishment, neither of which are permitted in the SB zone under the current regulations. So for those reasons alone, the ZBA may not approve this if the location approval system were still in effect. And again, it's because this is inextricably tied to the 7-Eleven store, the little mini grocery store with the fast food in it. I've gone through the definitions here. I don't want to take up too much time, but these are the current regs. Some of them were amended a couple of years ago in a well thought out process following the establishment of the most recent plan of development. You can go through this at your leisure, I suppose, as you review the materials here. A couple of things that are really important is under special controls under 757, commercial sales and services may be allowed in this zone if we're 3 acres in size, which we're not, and if we are within 1,000 feet of central business district, which we are not. Right? The regulation previously allowed retail uses such as Whole Foods on Ledge Road, which complied with both the minimum acreage and close proximity to the CBD, Central Business District. No other retail stores like this are located in the former SBE zone, which is now the SB zone, or in any of the current SB zones. And as of the 2019 amendments, now retail food establishments are not allowed in the SB zone at all. And I go through the standards here for motor vehicle stations, but this is for the Planning and Zoning Commission to review. If you're going to complete the process here on this location approval, you have to consider these. But one of the most important factors here is that this sale of non-automobile related goods and services was put here for a very limited purpose, to allow existing gas stations to convert their garage or service areas into little mini marts in order for them to survive, not to establish a retail sales of non-related products as a primary use along with the gasoline sales use. So this is an important consideration, and it goes back to what I said before. The ZBA could not approve a location where the gas station is tied to a non-conforming use or a non-permitted use under the zoning regulations. And I have a couple of citations to earlier decisions, 3 of them right here. The ZBA said specifically, because this application, I'm sorry, this is planning and zoning, because this application is for an accessory convenience store, and retail sales are not permitted in the service business zone. That language appears in 3 other gas station application approvals for conversion to mini marts. At 211 Post Road, which is across the street here under the SBE zone, which has now been changed, That use is limited still to light repairs, small sales with no food prep, no deli type sales, and limited hours 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. The proposed 7-Eleven, as I mentioned, does not comply with Section 1056, and the business activities are not consistent with the previous approvals for gas stations with accessory convenience stores, limited hours, no cooking or food prep, no fast food service. And I'll just mention a couple things in the 2019 amendments. This slide and this specific quote is from the staff memo that accompanied the proposed change to Section 750, which is the SB zone. Retail food establishments, which is exactly what this is, will not be allowed in the service business zone. Period. Could not be any clearer. The commission also left in place the 1,200 square foot minimum dining area requirement for full service restaurants, and you have diners and that sort of thing still in the SB zone, but you don't have these little 200 or 300 or 400 square foot areas for fast food like what's being proposed here. Again, the 1,200 foot minimum is still in place here. It was under consideration to change that, but as the commission approved the proposed amendments back in 2019, this is the comment that they had, and they decided to leave it at 1,200 square feet. And other issues, the traffic reports, there is ample evidence in Mr. Galante's report, in his comments, and even in the applicant's material, and plenty of comment from the public on the traffic issues to deny this application. And the only other point I'd like to make is there was a brief discussion after I spoke earlier about this shoulder line on the right side of the road as you approach the driveway to Dutchess in the eastbound direction heading toward the entrance ramp. There's nothing illegal about driving across that line. That shoulder is there for the purpose of getting around obstacles, getting around stopped traffic and disabled vehicles. And although the traffic consultants can tell you it's there because it's shoulder, but it's driving on it is not prohibited. And the possibility of accidents similar to the ones at the intersection of down by Trader Joe's, that's still a real possibility here. I think there was testimony earlier that has happened in the past a number of times, and that's still a real safety concern that you should consider, as well as obviously the Planning and Zoning Commission. All right, that's what I have. I think I touched on a couple more than I intended to, because I went a little bit beyond the location issue, but I don't need to say anything else, so I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Maslin. Attorney Suchins, do you Attorney Suchins, do you want to give any rebuttal or ask any questions of Attorney Maslin?
I do have rebuttal to Attorney Maslin, both on the interpretation and what I believe your jurisdiction is, and that this is appropriately before you and not before P&Z. And then just a couple of brief comments on his comments about the zoning regulations themselves. So if I could share my screen.
One moment, Amy.
Yep.
Do I need to do something, Fred?
No, I don't think so. Amy, is the screen share not available at the bottom of the GoToMeeting for you?
Hold on a second. I had just tried to pull up.
There we go. Hold on.
No, that- Just 1 second.
You should have screen share.
Yep, I'm just pulling it up right now.
Sure.
So what I wanted to highlight is Attorney Maslin has made the point that the revision to 14.321 and the statutory amendments, as you can see here, post Public Act 03-184, took jurisdiction of the location approval allegedly away from you. He's relying on the language saying that the certificate approval shall be obtained from the Zoning Commission, Planning Commission.
Pardon me.
Yeah.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oh, hold on. Is it there now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I went back to it and thought you could see it, sorry. So 14.321, and this is an annotated version of what Mr. Maslin had submitted. Certificate approval shall be obtained from the Zoning Commission, Planning and Zoning Commission, or local authority. And his interpretation cites, says that now this issue of location approval rests with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and goes back to the the repealed statute. However, when you look at Public Act 3-184 that he had provided, which made a series of amendments, this is the language that he had quoted from 14.321 and what the change was, saying that the blue underlined language is what the legislature added, and noticeably it says zoning and adds the conjunction or, and that's 14.321. Obviously, it used to just say shall be obtained from the local authority. Here it provides a couple of options. What that section also provided was in the definitions of 14.318, which is the section of definitions related to 14.321, local authority was also amended, which used to say just, it omitted this, did not have this blue language, or other border authority designated by local charter, regulation, or ordinance, because it used to also say that if you had a zoning commission and a board of appeals, local authority means the board of appeals. So what you're looking at when you read 14.321 is that it's or other border authority designated by local charter, regulation, or ordinance, and keeps the language that says when there's a zoning commission and a board of appeals, local authority means the board of appeals. So if you go back to the language of 14.321, I'm just going to scroll back up. What this actually now reads is a certificate approval shall be obtained from the Zoning Commission, Planning Commission, or Zoning Board of Appeals. And if you look back again at the definition that says as specified by your regulations, and in fact, in your regulation, the Darien zoning regulations, in section, as he cited, section 1124, it specifically says that the ZBA is authorized to issue those approvals. And Mr. Maslin went on to say, and I don't have your regulations pulled up separately, but he went on to say that the wording of that, it says motor vehicle sales, service, or repair uses, and goes on, makes the argument that those are sort of truly only sort of true service type uses. However, both the purpose of, in the definitions of your, in your regulations and in your motor vehicle service section in 1056, motor vehicle service specifically is called out as includes full service or combined full service self-station gas stations. So under your regulations, I don't think there is any ambiguity that between sections 1124, the existing motor vehicle service section in 1056, and the definitions for motor vehicle service in your regulations are all very clear that this is, properly before you with respect to jurisdiction. I think the other point, though slightly anecdotal, is that to the extent that he's going to say, well, your regulations haven't been updated, because I've said that to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the reason we have saw amendments of your zoning regulations is because your motor vehicle service regulations have not been updated in about 30 years. And so to the extent that there's any argument that he's trying to say, well, your regulations are simply outdated, I would point out that there were, I did a quick search, there are no less than 15 other municipalities in Connecticut that come up in sort of the first 2 pages of Google that still have their ZBAs issue these types of approvals. Danbury, Stamford, Wilton, Bethel, Trumbull, Glastonbury, Simsbury, plenty of towns that both in the area and throughout the state. So certainly this is not some sort of anachronistic provision in your regulations that was overlooked. I think it's a conscious decision to keep it before you, which is where it had traditionally been. Then with respect to the arguments he's made with the interpretation of the zoning regulations, his argument about a retail food establishment and commercial sales and service, I think most importantly, that is a question for the Planning and Zoning Commission in the context of the special permit, regulation amendment, site plan approval that is pending before them. To the extent that there is an argument that we are somehow not compliant, certainly it's not a situation like some of the cases that he cites where there's a lack of compliance with a special exception. Here we have proposed amendments, and if those are adopted, they are entirely consistent with the special exception criteria, and we would be entirely zoning compliant. To the extent that you do think it's relevant, number one, we are certainly not a retail food establishment. One of those things, it says, selling food or beverages not generally intended for immediate human consumption, and references a butcher or fish market. I think the concern that everybody has is that we are selling food that is intended for immediate human consumption. You're going to come in and you're going to buy a Slurpee, or you're going to buy something from another, you're going to buy a bag of chips, you're going to buy a coffee, whatever it is. So I think we are certainly readily distinguishable there. And then certainly with respect to the various arguments he makes about commercial sales and service, those are all applicable when the use that's commercial sales and service is a principal primary use. That is not what we have sought from the Planning and Zoning Commission. To be clear, both the regulation amendment and our application recognize that the retail and quick service restaurant are accessory uses. The gas station is the primary use here. So the arguments that he's made about those simply relate to other issues. And then I think the last point is, to the extent that he's trying to limit, in your record provided by staff is certainly all of the approvals given to his client and a number of the other gas stations in town. All of them do reflect the same thing that we have proposed, which is the retail sales to be accessory to the primary gasoline station use. So I think from a legal interpretation issue, Mr. Maslin's argument comes up short, and I think from a with respect to the commission's jurisdiction. And I think the same also applies to the arguments about our lack of zoning compliance given the pendency of the applications before the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So Attorney Suchins, I have a tendency to agree with your analysis on the authority of this board, including the definitional language that you cited, 14-318, where I need to understand your argument a little better. Assuming you don't get your approval of a text amendment or a change to the zoning regulations from planning and zoning, does that change your position around what Mr. Maslin's saying, that you are not conforming currently?
That's correct. And I don't think there's any question that our application relies on the text amendments that are pending before planning and zoning. Under your current regulations as drafted, our site does not comply with those requirements.
So that puts us in a bit of a tough position.
I don't think so.
Well, the amendments don't exist until they're approved, and we've got current regulations that we have to abide by. So it kind of does.
Well, I guess there are two things. One, the context of this location approval is certainly different from the case law that Mr. Maslin has cited, where there were no pending. It was the special exception had been denied. The special exception had been the location approval had been dependent on the special exception. And there was no pending, related application. I think if planning and zoning adopts our text amendment, then we satisfy the special exception criteria, and I think that ends the discussion. In a sort of, complete fallback situation, I think you could do one of two things. Simply, you could issue a decision after planning and zoning makes a decision, where we have time under the usual statutory timeframes, where frankly we're using most of the extension we had for conducting the public hearing, but certainly you still have 65 days to issue a decision once the public hearing's closed. And then second of all, I do think you could condition the location approval on a planning and zoning approval.
Attorney Maslin, any rebuttal? I tend to agree with the authority issue, so really I'd ask you to focus on the zoning issue that's before us, in that I guess Attorney Suchin's argument that if her amendments are approved, then she is in conformity and your argument has no merit.
All right. Well, I'm just going to say one thing, and it's in the OLR bill analysis on the first page at the bottom of my backup materials. That bill eliminated the requirement of going to the Zoning Board of Appeals. It's plain as day. And that deals specifically with motor vehicle type approvals for locations. I don't think it would be appropriate for the board to either close the hearing, wait for a decision from planning and zoning, and then act on the application without any further public comment, which might be based on the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision. Right now, we have an application that doesn't comply. It's not going to comply. And if something happens after the public hearing closes, but before you make a decision, the public would be denied the opportunity to comment on this application in light of the change in the regulations. So I don't think it's appropriate to do that. Number two, I forgot the name of the case, but a land use board may not condition an approval on an action of a different agency that it has no control over. In other words, you could not approve this on the condition that the Planning and Zoning Commission adopt the proposed regulation changes. That's something that's clear in the case law. I didn't know that question was going to come up. I would have had that citation for you.
Yeah, no,
but you know, the concept is you decide what's in front of you, and that's it. And if it complies, it complies. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The other thing that I think Attorney Suchins mentioned was that the location approval does not belong at planning and zoning. I disagree with that completely. And she also used the term special exception several times. What's before the Planning and Zoning Commission? Special permit, two different things. And throughout the state of Connecticut, special exceptions and in some cases, special permits are decided by zoning boards of appeals. Depends on which jurisdiction you're in. So, and then finally, I think I've said enough, and there's enough material relative to fast food service, restaurant uses, the 1,200 square feet, and retail food establishment. I don't think if somebody goes into a 7-Eleven and buys a couple of half gallons of milk, that's intended for immediate consumption. I'm sorry, but that's just not what 7-Eleven is about. And that's I think they'll close with that. I know it's getting late, and I didn't think you expected to go this long.
it is getting late. So if we
have two more.
Yeah, we have two more. And Attorney Suchins, let's touch on the sign. My biggest issue with the sign and what you need to convince me of is, and I told you this from the beginning, shouldn't be new or a shocker. You know, I don't see the hardship. It's not obvious to me. And I don't understand how a set of sign regulations that was recently adopted is so woefully inefficient for this site. So you need to convince the board of those two issues. Go.
Okay, so I guess just one procedural question first, Mr. Nutter. I see that it is 5 of 9. I can go through that. I also expect that we are going to continue tonight's hearing because you are still awaiting comments from the police commission, which I understand will be meeting again next week. I certainly do not want to close the hearing without knowing what the report from, or the opportunity to comment on whatever the police commission may decide. So I'm happy to touch on the signage, or if you want, I also have a couple of comments in response to Mr. Maslin, or if we're going to continue to the next meeting, we can start with signage if you have other business. I will defer to whatever you want. I'm just trying to be aware of what else is on the agenda and how long we might be.
Woody, we got 2 other items on the agenda. One of them is fairly complicated. The other one's not so complicated. This application's been before this board longer than any application I am aware of, so I'm inclined to work through, power through this and close this thing.
Mr. Chairman, I respectfully request, I will ask and request a continuance if you have not received the comments from the police commission, because I believe I'm entitled to respond to whatever comments they might provide.
Your request for a continuance is granted. We'll close this hearing as continued to the next hearing. Woody, when's the next hearing?
February 10.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Suchins.
Thank you, Mr. Nutter.
All right, we're on to 23-2020. This is, I apologize to everyone for the lengthy previous application. It's a little bit complicated and a lot of people are involved. So if you're here on, bear with me. Catherine Benoski for 57 Edgerton Street.
Hi, yes, we're here.
Hi, good
Okay.
evening.
Oh, this is the 5'8" porch
Portico. Yep.
portico. Okay, let me just streamline this a little bit.
Thank
Sure.
Is there anyone on the board that has an issue with this application?
I don't know if I have an issue, but I would like to hear two things. What is the unique aspect of the property as compared to other properties in the neighborhood, and what the hardship is?
So Kevin, let me stop you there for a second. So what we've decided as a board is that a 5'8" wide front stoop is a permissible item due to safety concerns. And so we've been advised that as a safety concern, they don't have to identify the unique hardship to the lot. So this falls under that health and safety exception.
I agree with the concept that if there is something that makes a property safer, we don't have to find that there is a hardship or something unique about the property. So if someone could just out of due diligence, give me a 30-second to minute description about how this makes the property safer, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely, I'm happy to. So this is Sean Manassi. This is my wife, Catherine. Thank you
Hey, Sean.
guys for your time. Very nice to meet everyone on the board. So it boils down to two main reasons why we requested this. One is due to the way that our house faces, get direct sunlight, especially in the spring and summer months. And we've actually had to replace our front door because of that. So the forward sloping portico that we are requesting is looking to alleviate that direct sunlight, so we don't have to replace our door anymore. And then secondly, our house floods. We have a crawl space like all houses on the side of our street. And because of that flooding, we're trying to push as much of water away from the front of our house as possible. So we've gotten drain extenders and everything, but we're hoping that the portico will help alleviate that as well. So that, coupled with the fact we have a 1.5-year-old and our second on the way, having a coverage, especially during snow and other storms, we'd help add safety to our home.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
And we do, I mean, we don't have to go through the whole presentation, but we do have a quick presentation if it's easier for us to run through that as well.
No, I don't think it's needed. I just wanted to hear the safety. So thank you.
Okay. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on this application? Seeing no one. Woody, anything to add? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and close your application. Thank you for your patience this evening.
Excellent.
Thank you
all.
The next application is 24-2020. James Peterson and Claudia Quintanilla, excuse me, represented by Robert F. Maslin, 218 Long Neck Point Road. Mr. Maslin, if you could give me a brief synopsis of what the issue is here. I've looked over the materials, and it's sort of obvious to me, but I'm not sure I'm thinking about it the right way. So can you just sort of educate me on what the issues are and how we're trying to resolve them?
Sure. For the record, Robert Maslin representing the applicants. Can I get the screen, and I'll just show you a rendering and a few other things if you need to. And these are nothing new. It's in the application package. So Fred or whoever, can you give me control? Oh, here we go. Screen. Okay. Okay. The issue is we have a principal house, principal use, with an accessory pool house and a pool. The pool house is almost completely underground. The west wall is along the is above ground, and it opens up to the terrace and pool. The issue on this is a lot that was recreated but made to conform. It's the old property on Long Neck Point Road. And what they did was divide it into two lots with the square on this lot up closer to the street. And the issue is when you put the principal house in the square or in the area where the lot's wide enough, and you put a principal or an accessory building and pool in a portion of the lot that's less than the minimum width, that's permitted under the zoning regulations. You need minimum width for the principal house. You don't need minimum width for the pool house. The issue arises when you connect the two with a tunnel right here. And what I've put in the application is a few plan views. Here's an illustration of the underground tunnel leading to this pool house and a few elevations. Here's the tunnel underground. You can see this is a cross section, actually. That's why you see some glass here. But the issue here is whether you can treat the underground pool house portion of this project as an accessory structure rather than part of the principal structure. And I based this request on something that was done in 2012 or 13, literally across the street at 203 Long Neck Point, where there was an architectural plan that showed virtually the same concept: a principal house, a pool, a recreation wing that was actually partially above ground. And in that particular application, I'll show you, I think on this, try to get a better, on that application, the, where is it? Here we go. The tunnel connected the two pieces, but the above ground portion of the principal house, the principal building, which was on the left, and the recreation wing were separated above ground by 5 feet. And this 5 feet zigged and zagged across the property. The zoning issue in this application was when you included both structures in the calculation of building height, the lower topography over to the right here, or the eastern side, brought your average grade around the foundation down low enough where the main house would no longer comply. So the ZBA, actually, Al Tibbetts was on the board then. He made a motion to treat this as a variance and to grant it, and nobody seconded the motion. So the board treated it as an interpretation and said, as long as you have 5 feet of separation here, the fact that it's connected by tunnel does not make this accessory building part of the main structure. You treat it as an accessory structure. So that's really what we're looking for. Dave Keating reviewed this, suggested that I write a letter, which we didn't get in time for the last ZBA meeting. Woody suggested we file an application, and that's why you have a full-blown application with potential variances. But if you grant us the interpretation we're requesting, we don't need the variances. Everything else about this project goes before planning and zoning in a coastal site plan application, including everything: the drainage, the grading, the landscaping, everything. It's going to require a public hearing, and that commission will address it all.
So Woody, procedurally here, if this commission has determined, it's a determination, not a variance, right? So a variance is unique. A determination is an interpretation of the regulations. So if we've made the determination that using a tunnel to connect two structures doesn't connect the two structures, and Kevin, I'd take your thoughts on this as well. Are we bound by that? I mean, isn't that a determination we've made?
Well, no, Mr. Chairman. Actually, in the 203 Long Neck case, it was very specific. The ZBA was not indicating this would apply to other projects in other locations. It was only for that particular site and that particular architectural design. So we couldn't say that this was a overall determination for the entire community.
Woody's correct, and I think I may have addressed that. In fact, it's in the application materials, a copy of that decision. So you see how it's expressly limited to that project, and that's why we're here. if it were a kind of a broad sweeping interpretation, similar to what you do with cupolas, we would comply with it and wouldn't be here. But it is very similar because it's two buildings, a pool, the recreation wing that opened up to the pool, and connected by a tunnel. So it's really very similar set of circumstances, except that our proposal is for the pool house to be completely underground, so you're not going to see it as if it's a separate structure until you get all the way to the west and can see the glass western wall.
So can I ask,
Mr. Chairman?
It's a question for Woody or Robert. Is the only question we're being asked on the interpretation point whether or not, if there is a tunnel connecting two structures, whether that means that it is not an accessory structure?
In a way, yes. I think to be specific, the question is, can we treat the underground pool house as an accessory structure, even though it's connected by an underground tunnel?
Right. And so is the lot width really irrelevant here? Is the question just, is it accessory despite being connected by an underground tunnel? Or is
Yes.
lot width relevant at all?
Lot width, well, if we didn't have the tunnel connecting it, lot width would not be relevant because you're allowed to have an accessory structure located on a part of the lot that's not the minimum width. It's the tunnel that raises the question, but if you took away the tunnel, the pool house would still be allowed to be built exactly the way it's proposed.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, maybe that helps us focus here. Is the tunnel necessary? Could this pool house and pool feature be separate from the house, as typically they are in most developments? Then the other issue that was a little difficult here was, is in fact the pool house going to be in the ground set in such a way with this tunnel that it appears not to be connected above ground, so that the way the structure sits on the land isn't one massive extended home, it's actually two separate features. Didn't think it was real clear from the submitted drawings how the grade would actually work and whether this would be buried. So if you're comfortable with it, it might be good to have some kind of condition to clarify that this would be entirely underground. There'd be some kind of landscape feature in between what's above ground with the pool house and what's above ground with the main house.
Okay, let me ask you a question, Woody. If we've got an underground construct, we've got a tunnel, is that considered a structure under the zoning regulations?
Yeah, it would be considered a structure, and it would need a building permit and inspections and all that. Yes. Yes.
Barb, Jeff, Dan, anything?
I mean, just one follow-up question for me. So, like, conceptually, imagine this is a small discrete pool house, and it's connected by some underground passageway. I guess I could view that as an accessory use, but there's a little bit of a dangerous precedent here and a little bit of a slippery slope. If we do this, and I know that we're not necessarily bound by it, what's to stop someone from having, instead of a pool house, a structure that they call a pool house, but which is in essence a multi-bedroom addition to their house that they have a very cleverly, quote, underground passage to get to? How do we draw a distinction between a shed or a pool house that happens to be connected by an underground passageway, rather than the wolf in sheep's clothing, which is an additional living structure that happens to be connected by an underground passageway that is and basically flush against the current residence.
Well, can I respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Going back to the 2003 plan, this, if you looked at it from the side, you would not be able to see clear through from one side to the other because this 5-foot separation zigzag through it. And you have this little red area where the tunnel was, and the side view showed, if this thing can come over, come on, here we go. There was a portion, here's the grade, and there was a portion of the house above grade. I mean, a portion of this recreation wing above the grade. Your question has to do with what about bedrooms and all of that? Under the current zoning regulations, you can have a guest house without a kitchen, 2 stories, in the same location as the pool house, not connected by a tunnel. So you could have something bigger. It would be subject to the height and the setbacks, but because it's an accessory structure, it would be allowed where we propose the pool house, because accessory structures can be built where you don't have the minimum width. So if you're concerned about the precedent, that's something that can be done without a tunnel. We're proposing here the pool house. It has, as soon as my computer gets with the program here, the pool house has a green top to it, as you can see here. And, you know, steps leading up to the terrace off the back of the house. So I mean, this is hardly visible as an above ground structure, except for the rear of it. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but
So if I understand your point.
Yeah, in terms of precedent, this is not one that's going to create a dangerous precedent where somebody can build a 2-story structure and call it accessory and connect it with a tunnel. You probably want to look at that and evaluate it and decide whether or not you want to approve.
If I understand your point is either you can build a separate structure there or you can't. And the fact that we connect it by an underground tunnel is almost irrelevant, except insofar as if you are connecting it by an underground tunnel, it could be viewed as something other than accessory, and then you need a variance.
I didn't understand the last part. If it's truly an accessory structure, which this is, and you connect it by tunnel, you wouldn't know looking at it that it's one or another. You wouldn't think that this is part of the main structure.
Can I just ask, where, if anywhere, in the code does it say, or may it imply, or that's created confusion, that connecting the two means it's not accessory?
No, there's nothing in the regulations that specifically says that.
So has someone, a town official, told you you can't get a permit for this because attaching it is accessory?
Dave Keating. No, he said take it to ZBA because he's not comfortable approving it in light of the 2002 or 12 or 2012 decision.
Bob, did you talk to any of the neighbors about this?
I haven't, no. I understand the owner has been speaking with the property owner to the north, which is the house that's under construction now, getting together and working out a landscape plan between the two properties. I don't know if there's been any contact with the owner on the other side.
I think this is so unique. If it weren't for the tunnel, first of all, you would completely 100% consider it a secondary structure. But the fact that they've masked it underground and it's literally just a tunnel, and I get Woody's point that a tunnel is still structural, but I don't think it changes the fact that it's an accessory structure. And is there a full working kitchen in this thing?
No.
Okay. So it is.
There may be a bar with things that you would put in with a bar, but not a not a full
I'm good.
kitchen.
The tunnel is the only issue for me, and I think you get around that because it's underground. It's unique to this situation. I think it's good.
Bob, would you consent to stipulation, no kitchen, no bedrooms, and no construction on top of this?
I
That's a good
would,
point. Yeah.
the no kitchen is fine. What do you do if there's what if you want to have a guest and you want to make a guest room out of this? You can do that without the tunnel anyway. Kitchen, yes, because that's in the zoning regs. Building on top of it, I would think, I can't imagine somebody building on top and ruining the view from, the main house, because that's designed so you can see over this. Something that would, for example, require the owner to come back if they wanted to build above it and not have it as like a permanent prohibition, but have it subject to your review.
Yeah.
Would that be workable for you?
That works for me. Jeff, any questions?
I agree.
Kevin?
Sorry, I was muted. No, I'm good, Mike. I'm sort of in Barb's camp here.
Dan, how are you doing?
I'm good. I agree with Barb and Jeff.
I struggle a little bit with it. I mean, I feel like if it's an accessory structure, it shouldn't be attached to the main structure. Okay. We spent 3 hours on one application and 18 minutes on two.
I'm trying to be efficient this time.
That's how we roll. That was fast for Bob. Bob, that was as fast as you get.
That's
He's tired too.
I'm going to suggest, not to hold anyone up, I'm going to suggest we close the hearing and we spend another 15 minutes or so deliberating, if the board will bear with me.
Yes.
And Woody, we're not doing other business tonight. I'm just preparing you for that.
Can I?
It's been 2 months with approving October minutes or some darn thing.
Mike, can I suggest something that you discuss it while the hearing's technically still open? So if a question comes up, we can.
I don't think we have any questions. It's an
Because I'll just
interpretation.
sit here and listen. I promise not to say anything unless asked.
Is there anybody from the public that wants to be heard? Did you ask that?
Oh, I didn't ask that. Is there anyone from the public that wants to be heard? Okay. Woody, do you have anything further on this application? Okay.
No, I think we have some potential stipulations that we could copy from 203 Long Neck, for instance. That's in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
report.
So, okay. So we're gonna go ahead and close the hearing. Bob, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you for your time. I know it's late.
Thank you to all the public who hung in there with us. And we're going to go into deliberations now. So this is the part of the hearing where, it's just the board member speaking. So we'll start on our deliberations for 23-2020. I agree. It's a health and safety issue. Ice, snow, those are real concerns in the Northeast. I think they have an additional hardship with additional issue with their flooding issue, which probably doesn't create a great, safe environment for their family. Woody, I would propose to make a motion to approve that application with the typical stipulations that we would include: not to be enclosed, no light to be shed off site. I think you have a standard set of those stipulations that we include.
Yeah, we do. Did you mention lights, not to have glare off site?
Yep.
I think you did, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe. Okay.
No, go ahead.
Well, that's understood. If you want to have the routine, don't enclose it, don't add up and over it. Just 5 feet by 8 feet. I think that's what the plan is.
Yep. Finish dimensions.
Okay.
Do I have a second to that? Jeffrey? All in favor?
Yes, sir.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. And then we've got the Tunnel of Love. Attorney Maslin's application. you know, I struggle with it a bit. I made it, you know, I think it's a unique property, and I think if we condition it on the fact that any significant modification, Woody, has to come back to the zoning board of appeals for review, meaning an addition on the second story, significant alteration of the use of the property, any of that has to come back to us. And then the fact that what was I going to say? The fact that this is an underground structure, it doesn't appear as a connected structure to the main facility. They're not doing a massive, 20-foot wide tunnel. They're doing a relatively modest tunnel to get access to it. And I think it's a pretty neat project. So I think with those stipulations on modifications, improvements, additions, I'm inclined to determine that this is an accessory structure. I don't know, do I need a second on that, I guess?
I'll second it because I completely agree. It's a determination, it's underground, and it's fantastic. I love what they did. So if this comes back to bite us, I think it's fine. I think it's great.
I would just,
Barb will all get an invite.
so my view is if this was a request for a variance, it would be a hard no, absolute no for me. But in terms of our statutory obligation to interpret the zoning regulations, if there is a structure that is otherwise fully legal and would be permitted as of right, the mere fact that it's connected by an underground tunnel, I don't think means that it's not an accessory use. So I'm comfortable supporting this.
Okay, great.
And I would add to that, I still think it's an accessory use, but I think it's the way they've done it. I agree with you. This is not a variance. This is a determination. I agree. So, yes.
And it's a unique property. It's a unique site. So this isn't setting precedent for some other site to come in and get the same thing. It's, so, all right. So I'll make a motion to approve. Oh, Woody, the other thing, no full kitchen.
Pardon me?
No full kitchen.
Yeah, but that's part of the zoning that goes with it anyway.
Part of the zoning regulations, but just put it in there anyways.
I'm sorry, what did you say? No kitchen?
Kitchen, yes.
Okay. You want to stipulate, like we did at 203, that this is unique to this property. I think you were referring to that.
Yes.
Shouldn't be a whole community-wide determination. Now, how about, should we insist on the final plans verifying that this tunnel would be completely underground? No structural connection, it's all landscapes between the house.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll second it. I love it.
Okay. Second, all in favor? Unanimous. Look at us.
It's like we get together outside of this. It's like we're in simpatico.
What did you want? You got a requested 6-month extension. What's going on there?
A couple things that sure would be nice to go up for 5 minutes here. That's on essentially Walmsley Road. And actually, like everyone with the pandemic, they're having trouble getting things done.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the 6-month extension. Do I have a second? Jeffrey Williams, all in favor? Okay, that's approved. The minutes, can they wait till the next meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
They're good though. Didn't we all look at them? We looked at them online. No?
Yeah, you've all looked at them months ago.
I'm good with them.
Oh, did we? Okay. I don't remember seeing. That's fine. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the September 23rd minutes. In favor?
I'm already.
Second is Dan, and then all in favor.
I abstain.
Everyone but
That's probably 3 of you.
Kevin. Kevin. And then approval of the October 14th minutes. That was me, Jeff, and Dan and Barb. I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Seconded and in favor. Okay. Thank you very much, Channel 79. We are out of here. Have a great night.
Nice work, Mike. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good job.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.